Chief of the Bureau of Automotive Repair, and I want to welcome everyone to the Bar Advisory Group meeting. This is Thursday, October 19th, 2017, and this is the fourth of the quarterly meetings that we hold each year. So this will be our final meeting of the calendar year 2017, and we'll pick up again in January of 2018. It's hard to believe that we're already nearing the end of the year and getting into the holiday season as the stores are getting us accustomed to right now. Anyway, we've got a busy agenda. I'm very excited to announce that we have a number of appointments at the Department of Consumer Affairs that have happened or have been announced in the last week or so, and want to make sure that we get an update from the departments and the director's office specifically in just a minute. Before we do, we'll do a quick round of introductions of the advisory group members who are here today. I notice once again no one has chosen a chair next to me, so I won't take that personally, but that seems to be stay away from the attention, I guess, and the direct hits of questions. Before we start those introductions, I want to make sure that everybody knows that, and is reminded, this is being webcast. And you can send comments if you're listening in via webcast to barmeeting@dca.ca.gov. Again, that's barmeeting, all one word, barmeeting@dca.ca.gov. All right, let's begin with some introductions. Vince?
Good morning. I'm Vince Gregory with AAA of Northern California.
Megan McKernan, Auto Club of Southern California.
Jack Molodonoff, representing the California Auto Body Association.
George Ritz, California Automotive Teachers.
John Gallo, California Automotive Business Coalition.
I'm Nikki Ayers, and I'm now officially taking over for John McConnell because he's retired, for the Independent Automotive Professionals Association.
All right, thank you very much. If the mics have a button at the bottom to turn on a green light, and that should amplify the voices for all those listening in, both here and at home or at their offices via the webcast. All right, a few more introductions. I want to announce my executive team. Doug Bellotti, Assistant Chief in the back. All right, is Tim Corcoran, I think I saw him earlier, Deputy Chief for Field Operations and Enforcement. Is Clay Leak here? Clay? I didn't see you yet. Is Clay here? He was here. Someone said he was here. Well, we'll embarrass him with an introduction as he walks in the room. But Clay Leak, he is the Deputy Chief for Smog Check Operations and Information Services. And Patty Wall is not in attendance today. She's Deputy Chief for Administration, which includes the Consumer Assistance Program and our licensing programs. All right, we're ready to begin. Our first speaker is Christopher Kring. Is that right? Yes, yeah. Come on up, Chris. He is newly appointed. I had a bio on you, Chris, but maybe I don't know if I still have it. It was supposed to have been given to me, and I can't remember your entire resume, but I know that you were with a lobbying firm here in town up until your appointment by the governor, effective just a week or so ago. So why don't we start off with your introduction and tell us all the great news that's happening at the department, including the number of new appointments along with yourself.
Indeed. Thanks, Pat. It feels like I'm testifying in front of the legislature again. Appreciate that. Good morning, members. Patrick, thank you for the opportunity for the department to provide an update to the Bureau. As you are aware, as Pat mentioned, we have some new faces in the DCA Executive Office, and as one of those new faces, I wanted to take the opportunity to introduce myself to all of you. My name is Christopher Castrillo, and I was appointed Deputy Director of the Office of Board and Bureau Services on October 9th. I come to DCA with a background in public policy and campaign management, having most recently worked as a legislative advocate where I covered a number of policy areas, including labor, higher education, youth mental health, foster care, healthcare, and local government. I have also worked on candidate and initiative campaigns in both California and Oregon. New to the DCA family, learning this world every day. I'm in week 2 here. Greatly looking forward to applying my experience and skill set towards establishing an Office of Board and Bureau Services that implements the goals laid out in our strategic plan and exemplifies organizational effectiveness and provides relevant, timely, and accurate information to all of our stakeholders. We are also looking forward to Karen Nelson and Patrick Lee coming on board as our Assistant Deputy Directors for the new Office of Board and Bureau Services. Mr. Lee has been Assistant Chief of External Affairs at Covered California since 2015, and Ms. Nelson has been Chief Operations Officer at the American Leadership Forum Mountain Valley chapter since 2014. We're excited to have them aboard, and you'll be hearing more from them after they begin their service on October 30th. With our new staff structure, I believe we will be able to further the mission, vision, and values we have set forth as a department, and most importantly, serve the needs of California consumers. Please stay tuned for additional updates from me as I continue my transition into my new role here at DCA and as our office fully takes shape. Additionally, the department is welcoming a new Chief Deputy Director, Chris Schultz, and a new Deputy Director of Administration, Natalie Daniel. Before coming to DCA, Mr. Schultz has served as Commissioner of Community Programs and Policy Initiatives at the California Department of Insurance since 2011. Mr. Schultz will begin with the department on October 30th. Ms. Daniel has been a fiscal supervisor at the Judicial Council of California since 2015 and will be starting with the department on November 7th. She will be overseeing the department's Office of Human Resources, Business Service Office, and Fiscal Operations. That's that for the appointments. There's a couple other updates that I wanted to provide to the Bureau. In September, the second Director's Quarterly meeting with executive officers and Bureau Chiefs was held. We are very focused on ensuring the department continues an open dialogue with its boards and bureaus. To that end, we will still be holding an annual meeting to ensure the Director is available to you, that he can hear your feedback from board and bureau leadership on important issues facing the department and its boards and bureaus. One of the important items that was announced at that meeting that I would like to share with you, that this month DCA released a new online license search verification tool for all of its boards and bureaus. The license search will expand the current functionality and allow the public more flexible search capabilities. The new search allows inline filtering on a range of key relevant data points, including primary and secondary status, city, county, and license type. A key focus for the new search is the user experience, performance flow, and ease of use are our primary targets. The new DCA search brings our offering closer to the familiar search capabilities common across the internet, allowing our stakeholders the data they require at their fingertips. You can access the new search tool at http://search.dca.gov. DCA Leadership Training. The department officially launched its new Future Leadership Development Program in May 2017 and recently held the kickoff meeting with program participants and mentors on Monday, August 28th. I attended one last week and it was fantastic. The next meeting of Future Leadership Development participants will be next Tuesday, October 24th, featuring Senator Jerry Hill. Expanding on the department's current Leadership Academy training, the department is looking to help develop the best and brightest among the department and its boards and bureaus into its future leaders. The program includes executive mentoring, customized leadership training, and project management. Pro Rata. The department has established a Pro Rata work group of DCA and board executives to discuss potential improvements on how DCA communicates with boards and bureaus on this issue. Pro Rata is the process by which the department distributes the costs among its boards and bureaus to cover all departmental services such as information technology, legal, publication services, and so on. The work group held its first meeting in August 2017. The next Pro Rata workshop will be held on October 31st, and the department will also be hosting a Pro Rata open house on November 14th. The strategic plan. In July, the department released its new strategic plan. The department's executive team developed it with the assistance of Solid, and it outlines DCA's goals and objectives for the next 4 years, and that plan is available on the publications page of the DCA website. A couple last items here. Required board member trainings. The final board member orientation training in 2017 is scheduled for November 15th. There is still room for the class if you need to register. Board members are required to complete this training within 1 year of appointment and reappointment to a board. This is a one-day training in Sacramento which details the important functions and responsibilities of board members. Please contact DCA's solid team if you are interested in attending, or board members can register online. And finally, a reminder that 2017 is a mandatory sexual harassment prevention training year for the Department of Consumer Affairs. This means that all employees and board members are required to complete this training in 2017, even if it was completed last year. This training is online, interactive, and can be completed at your convenience. If you have any questions related to this or any of the other required trainings during your tenure, please do not hesitate to contact the Office of Board and Bureau Services for assistance. As always, the department can be of service to the Bureau. Please let us know. Thank you for your diligent work and your valued partnership.
Thank you, Chris. First of all, I want to apologize if I mispronounced or misstated your last name, Chris Castrillo.
No worries, it
The
happens. Yeah.
double C's, I think, threw me. Great, thank you for the update. Very nice presentation. We might have a few questions, so just stick around for just a second here. I just want to make sure and clarify the new online license search tool is just right now available. The first phase was for the Breeze clients that went that have integrated into their licensing and systems into that new Breeze system. That was all the phase release 1 and release 2 clients. BAR being one of the later phases, phase 3 or release 3, will not see the online license search tool until I think spring is what they're talking about with the department. So we'll see that. It looks really nice from what we've been able to see from the release on Monday. It's something that obviously will be very helpful to all our stakeholders in looking up our information relative to our licensees. Anyway, just want to make that point clear.
Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Castrillo? All right. Well, they let you off easy.
Man.
They're usually
I
got.
appreciate
you should
that
see
for
what's
my
coming.
first time.
They've got
That's
questions
lovely.
always, usually. But thank you for the update.
Patrick, appreciate it.
All right. Our next presenter, Sergi Elmorchetti, on legislative and regulatory matters, giving an update on the legislation that we were tracking and regulations that we are working on. Good morning.
Good morning. Morning, everyone.
Good?
Yeah. All right. I'm here to give the final legislation and regulations update for the year for the Bureau of Automotive Repair. So let's jump right in. First bill we'll discuss is AB 188. That was signed by the governor and chaptered by the Secretary of State on October 10th. This bill requires Air Resources Board to update guidelines for the retire and replacement option within the Enhanced Fleet EFMP program to consider incentives to purchase light-duty trucks, mirroring existing guidelines for the purchase of minivans. The program guidelines must make applicable to light-duty trucks the same standard for miles per gallon that is applicable to minivans. And this bill incorporated statutory amendments proposed by AB 630, which was double jointed with AB 630 because they're amending the same sections of the Health and Safety Code. Transitions us right into AB 630, which was also signed by the governor and chaptered by the Secretary of State on October 10th. This bill requires that beginning the 2018-2019 fiscal year, the Air Resources Board and Bureau of Automotive Repair must set specific annual goals for the retired and replacement option, post that information on the board and bureau's websites. It would require both organizations to update the guidelines by expanding the allocation of funds for the retired and replacement option and mobility option for car sharing and public transportation vouchers by the beginning of 2019. This bill also allows for the redirection of EFMP, VERF, and HIPRA funds to Air Resources Board's Clean Cars for All program as needed upon allocation by the legislature. AB 1005 deals with citation fines, requires that any citation issued by the Department of Consumer Affairs Board and Bureaus containing an order to pay administrative fine also includes an order of abatement period, granting time for abatement of the violation before the administrative fine becomes effective. This bill was last held under submission in the Appropriations Committee on May 26th. And just a little background, it's an action taken when a committee, by the committee when a bill is heard and there's an indication by either the author or the committee that they'd like to work on or further discuss the bill. This is a 2-year bill, meaning that it was introduced in an odd number year of the legislative session, and it fails to pass through the House by the required deadline, which was September 15th. It would have had to be approved by each House. Next up is AB 1069, which relates to taxicab transportation services. This bill establishes taxicab regulations done through local ordinances and requires taxicab companies to maintain vehicles in safe operating condition and in compliance with the vehicle code. This bill was signed by the governor and chaptered by the Secretary of State on October 12th, just 1 week from today. Another provision in this bill would require an annual inspection to be performed by a bar licensee as prescribed by the local jurisdiction. So that provision was a late amendment to the bill, and it's kind of similar to the 19-point inspection required for transportation network company vehicles. Jack?
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on that. So is that your understanding that the inspection required by the taxi cab is going to be the 19-point inspection, or is it going to be something different that the BAR is going to set?
What the author's office had communicated was that it would be similar to the inspection in regulation to be performed on vehicles that are a part of the transportation network companies like Lyft and Uber.
Okay. Thank you.
I guess kind of cutting to the chase on that question, it's not going to be a bar established inspection. It'll be determined by the local jurisdiction.
Yeah, I believe, and what they also said was that it's something that's already in place with the local ordinances, and it would just, this bill just puts it into statute.
So under current law, as I understand it, that the Lyfts and the Ubers have to get this 19-point inspection. They look at the brakes, they look at windshield, they look at, there's a criteria that's set out by I think the Public Utilities Commission, and there are a checklist. So this now, I guess, I wasn't aware of that taxi cabs did not have to go through this inspection, but now, because of this bill, will have to go through this inspection and have to go to someone that's registered with the BAR to get this inspection. Is that?
That's our interpretation, yeah, understanding.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Next is AB 1274, which deals with extending the smog check exemption for new vehicles to 7- and 8-year model vehicles. Exempted vehicle owners would pay $25 of an annual abatement fee, $4 of which would be deposited to BAR's Vehicle Inspection and Repair Fund. This was signed by the governor and chaptered by the Secretary of State on October 10th of this year, and does not impact the 4 model years and newer exception for change of ownership inspections. Since we last had spoke at the July meeting, the bill was amended to increase $1 that would go towards the Vehicle Inspection and Repair Fund to reconcile any projected funding shortfall from the loss of smog certificate fees. Next is AB 1679, which deals with auto body labor rate surveys. This bill would replace provisions established by the CDI regulations that went into effect at the beginning of 2017 and require the redevelopment of methodology for determining labor rates for auto body repair. It would also require insurers using labor rate surveys to conduct surveys in specific geographic areas and report results to CDI every 24 months. This is also a 2-year bill, as it was referred to the suspense file on May 17th of this year. When a bill is referred to the suspense file, it's a fiscal bill that typically set aside by a majority vote of the Appropriations Committee members to be heard at a later hearing. Next is SB 210. This bill deals with heavy-duty motor vehicle emissions inspections. Similar to SB 638, which was introduced earlier this year and later amended, SB 210 was amended on August 23rd to address the issue originally covered in SB 638. The bill would require ARB and BAR to adopt regulations that require emission inspection and compliance standards and procedures for testing heavy-duty vehicles. Lastly, we have SB 547, which deals with professions and vocations within the Department of Consumer Affairs. The bill makes technical and clarifying substantive changes to policies that affect various boards and bureaus. It was signed by the governor and chaptered by the Secretary of State on October 2nd. And specifically as it relates to BAR, the bill exempts BAR from certain state procurement requirements governing the acquisition, where the vehicles are coming from, and characteristics like make, model, color, engine type, things like that for the vehicles that BAR procures. Call for legislation. We'll move on to the regulations that are currently pending. First up is mobile automotive repair regulations, which would establish advertising requirements for mobile automotive repair businesses. This regulation was filed with the Office of Administrative Law earlier this year, but it disapproved for technical reasons unrelated to the substantive changes or additions to BAR's regulations. Currently, we are beyond a 15-day public comment period, which ended in June of this year, and the final rulemaking package was resubmitted to the Office of Administrative Law on October 4th. Pending approval, BAR is requesting immediate adoption upon filing with the Secretary of State and will perform outreach with consumers and the industry. Next, we have the electronic documents and consumer authorization regulations. These would allow for electronic estimates and authorizations, transmission and storage of repair transaction documents, and reorganize estimate, work order, and invoice provisions to more closely align with automotive repair transactions. BAR's held multiple public workshops on this regulation going back to July of 2015, and currently we are reviewing public comments received up to the hearing held on September 26th. Pending review, BAR is planning to submit a 15-day notice of public comment for any revisions to the regulations, and beyond that we'll file a final rulemaking package with the Office of Administrative Law.
I think I'll just jump in here real quickly. We had a number of excellent comments relative to that 45-day public comment period, including at the both written and at the hearing on September 26th. And I think that'll necessitate some changes and another 15 days added on to the public comment for. Yeah, well, if you would stop commenting, John. No, I'm just teasing. I know you.
Gotta do what you gotta do.
You and others made some really excellent comments that I think we took to heart, and it would be wouldn't be wise on our part to ignore any of those comments. I mean, we certainly want to address them and make them this package as useful to everyone as possible. So yeah, we'll have another 15 days. It'll be the way the regulatory process works is it'll be subject to, the comments will be subject or limited to just the changes. So we won't be opening it all up again. So that's my understanding of the regulatory process. Anyway, they'll be minor, but substantive enough to require another 15-day public comment period. And I hope that'll happen real soon. We're putting the finishing touches on those changes. We were this week and hope to maybe as early as next week have the 15-day start.
Thank you, Pat.
Sorry for the interruption.
No problem. The next regulation package we have is a Bar 97 specifications update, which would modernize Bar 97 equipment standards for smog check stations by removing the dedicated analog phone line requirement and require transfer of data from the vehicle information database through a standard internet connection. It would also require low-pass fuel emission tests to communicate directly with the Bar 97 and update minimum computer hardware and software standards. Bar held multiple public workshops on these regulations. They're currently in the formal review process and under review with the Business, Consumer Services, and Housing Agency. Upon approval with agency, we'll file with the Office of Administrative Law and publicly notice for a 45-day comment period. Next, we have regulations that would update BAR's training provider requirements to make requirements for certification of smog check station training providers consistent with current licensing requirements. Would also authorize training for compliance with laws and regulations, and the regulations make conforming changes to the Bureau's disciplinary guidelines. Currently, this regulation package is in DCA Legal's preliminary review, which is an initial review of proposed regulation text and documents explaining the issue, purpose, necessity, anticipated benefit by the proposed regulations. Next, we have the STAR program cleanup regulations. These would delete outdated Gold Shield program provisions and amend STAR eligibility criteria and revise the STAR suspension process to be consistent with statute. Status of this regulation package is also DCA legal preliminary review. Upon approval, it would move to DCA-wide formal review, in which BAR submits all rulemaking file documents required under the Administrative Procedures Act for comprehensive review by DCA's Legal Affairs Division, Legislative and Regulatory Review, budgets, and all the way up to the Director's Office before it would be submitted to the agency for approval. Next, we have brake and lamp program updates of the handbook and licensing applications for brake and lamp adjusters and stations. And it would also update brake and lamp certificates. A public workshop was held in October of 2016 on these regulations. They are currently in further development at BAR. Next, proposed regulations regarding exempted minor services and pre-service inspections. The purpose of these regulations are to update the list of minor services exempted from statutory definition for repair of motor vehicles. It also defines roadside services and includes that in the list of minor services exempted, and defines pre-service inspection, which can be performed upon a customer's oral authorization by an automotive repair dealer. We last held a public workshop following the July 2017 BAR Advisory Group meeting, and currently this is under preliminary review, submitted last week on October 13th. Lastly, we have the oil change service intervals regulations, which would require ARDs to adhere to maintenance schedules published by vehicle manufacturers, industry accepted and nationally distributed automotive service specification providers, or CalRecycle, when making a recommendation to the customer. These regulations do not prohibit customers from requesting an interval that differs from the manufacturer's published maintenance schedule, and would define recommendation to include placement of a window sticker, reprogramming of an oil life indicator statement on an invoice, and so forth. These regulations were workshopped following the recent public hearing held at BAR on September 26th, and there currently comments received during the workshop are under review for possible revisions to the regulations. That's all I have, so any questions or comments?
I have a question. I know.
Jack, go ahead.
Thank you for the report. I have a question regarding with the status on some of the regulations. I know when it says that the status DCA legal preliminary review, how long, I guess, in terms of time frame? I mean, I know you can't tell me specifically, but are we talking about 3 months, 6 months, or what? I mean, what are the goals to get these things moving forward?
For the initial review period, our goals are typically in shorter term, around a month, but oftentimes there's things being pointed out that can extend that time cycle for these up to a few months.
The reason I'm asking, I mean, this is not news, it's just that some of these regulations are taking a lot longer, and I know it's not necessarily, BAR, there's, you're dealing with DCA, and I'm just wondering if internally you have a certain, set timeline saying, hey, within 60 days, we'd like to get this, there's certain guidelines and deadlines to meet to move forward, and I just wanted to find out from you if on some of these, like the DCA legal preliminary review, what's the reasonable expectations? 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, until you sort of you ping someone and saying, hey, it's not done yet. We need to move forward with this. I'm just trying to figure out a timeline if you have one internally.
What's been established in terms of the informal review is about a 30-day window from submission of those documents to legal.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Challenge, of course, with us is we have so many regulatory package, so sometimes, and prioritization of that workload is oftentimes.
Not to mention those they're reviewing for other boards and bureaus, I would imagine.
True. Our attorneys are handling other clients within the Department of Consumer Affairs as well, so there is a juggling of work and prioritization of that work constantly. But I think roughly the informal review is we try to keep it within around a 30-day time frame, but those have been extended in some circumstances. I will note for a couple of them that are the STAR program and the schools requirements, training provider requirements, I think it's called. Those two are in the informal process, but you just met with Fred. Fred is our legal counsel who's been a reassignment of those two packages to him. He's completed his initial review and met with you as recently as this week. I think earlier this week you met on both those packages, and sounds like we're down to just a couple of clarity issues that need to be shored up, as I understood
That's
it
correct,
from you.
yes.
Yeah.
Those two regulation packages are.
So we'll hope to go into the DCA-wide formal review very shortly. And that's an opportunity for budgets, the ledge office, the deputy director for legal affairs, all to sign off on it before it goes to the director, and then ultimately to the agency before it gets filed with the Office of Administrative Law. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Any other comments? I did get a comment on the webcast. Mr. DeRay, AB 1274 not only eliminates needed environmental protection by identifying vehicles producing harmful emissions, but also reduces revenue for the emission inspection industry by 15% or more. How can the testing industry protect itself from politicians reducing emissions protection and shrinking the size of our market? I won't attach any names to it. No, it was not. Mr. Peters. I think the best answer I have for that, and for any legislative matters, to work through your associations, be a member of associations so you can be tied in or connected to the happenings, and mobilize a position, whether it be in support or opposition to any bill. That's my best advice. From here, if anyone else wants to comment on that, we have a number of associations represented here who were fairly outspoken about their positions on this bill, and despite that effort, I know that the bill was still able to make it to the governor's desk and was signed. Beyond that, I'm not exactly what other guidance I can give. We certainly work to bring all of the information forward through this advisory group and keep people aware and up to speed and up to date on the various happenings in the legislature relative to the Bureau of Automotive Repair. Any other comments? Mr. Gallo?
John Gallo, California Automotive Business Coalition. We want to echo what the person just responded through on the webcast, because Cal ABC and numerous others were in opposition of this bill, not only because of the impact that it's going to have on the smog check industry and businesses, but also on consumers. We're very concerned that the governor signed this bill after opposition to the bill, because many of these vehicles now, extending it 2 years, is going to take it past the warranty period for not only federal but state emissions controls. And a lot of the expenses that consumers are now going to bear are post-warranty. And that is very concerning that the governor would sign this bill.
Thank you for the comment. Yes, Nikki.
I'd like to go back to.
Nikki Ayers with the Independent Automotive Professionals Association.
Sorry about that. If I go back and look at like the STAR program and the brake and lamp program, and the last time there was a public workshop was in 20. But now they're at the preliminary legal review and then to go to DCA. Seems like there might have been some other issues that might have come up since then. Is there going to be time for more public comment, or?
Oh,
is that-
definitely.
Or is
When
that
it's
just it?
so two things.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh.
It was a question.
No, I just wondered, it's been a long time since we've had public comment on that. And other issues that have come up since then, so I wondered.
Sure, I'm not opposed to necessarily holding another public workshop. I don't know that the changes or the work that's been done, or lack thereof, are anything terribly substantive, but we can take a look at it. There might be some changes that would necessitate another public workshop. I think it's a fairly comprehensive
I was just
package.
wondering if comments can still come in.
Oh, so that's the second part of my answer. So public workshop on the table, we'll take a look at, have there been enough changes that would, we feel, require us to go out and do another public comment, or were the changes mostly just clarifying language or responding to some of the concerns internally from our legal office, for example. There will be, once we file the regulation package, as there is with every regulation, a 45-day public comment period, an official public comment period, if you will. And that gives everybody an opportunity, and everyone who's on our interested parties list is notified about that public comment period as it relates to every regulation package filed with the Office of Administrative Law. So yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, I just didn't understand.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. That's a
Excellent
great question.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Anything from the audience? Sure, Gene. Please introduce yourself. A former advisory group member.
Thanks for the report.
Gene Lopez.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Gene, when you said my name. So, Gene Lopez, I'm with Seidner's Collision Center. We're a 14 location operator, collision center operator in Southern California. Regarding the brake and lamp programs, and I'm sure everyone is aware, but with today's advanced vehicles, and certainly the ADAS vehicles, or advanced driver assist systems, when we're speaking of lamps, many of these lamps today are adjustable lamps, are adapted with other components on the vehicles, and it's the workshop was held a year ago, and I'm wondering if in today's environment these lamp adjusters are qualified to calibrate or reinitialize some of these systems. And they may not be, from the standpoint that they may not be able to get the data on reinitializing or calibrating these systems. And so, and that would be from some of the high-end vehicles, but even some of the standard vehicles today are coming out with this ADAS that would require special scanning equipment and other tools to make these adjustments. So I just, where are we at today, and we'll be looking at this in the future.
Excellent comment. You're right in line with some of our own thoughts on this. So we'll take a look at the current package. I'm not sure how much within our existing legal authority we'll be able to advance in some of these new areas. We are checking on that and relative to this pending regulation, but maybe need to look at another workshop with the industry. As you have pointed out, it's been a while since we focused on this with our various stakeholders.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sergi. All right, our next presentation, a standing presentation, an update on the California Vehicle Inspection System, the transition project. Clay Leak, Deputy Chief at BAR, and Eric Schwartz with SGS Testcom. Clay I missed you on the introductions, but Clay Leak, Deputy Chief of Smog Check Operations.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here for our annual update on the Vista Project. I'm sure it will be scintillating as usual. Quarterly, excuse me. I will introduce Eric Schwartz in a minute. He is the new program manager representing SGS Testcom. So the presentation will be a little bit divided today. I'll be kind of giving an update on the RFP and where we're at with that, and Eric will kind of be filling in the other piece of the project, which is the ongoing refresh efforts in terms of moving the system over to OTEC. So just a quick reminder in terms of the scope of this project. The goals were to negotiate ownership of the California Vehicle Inspection System, which we all know supports kind of all that is smog check. Refresh the system to a state-owned data center, and in parallel with those activities, publish an RFP and obtain ongoing maintenance and operation services. So in terms of the status of the RFP, obviously we all know the first rule of the RFP is you don't really talk about the RFP, but I will give you kind of as much information as I can. We are on schedule. Tasks are moving along very well. Bidders library was published and is available to all bidders. We have received the first round of draft bids. We have completed our initial review of those bids. We have provided our feedback to all of those bidders. We are in the process of developing a third addendum, which will be published at some point in the future. The team is also working hard conducting scoring exercises, making sure our evaluation criteria holds up. And we do have some confidential discussions coming up over the next few weeks with all of the bidders that did submit draft bids. A couple additional items in terms of project dependencies. Obviously, getting all of the Bar 97 equipment transitioned over to the internet and off of dial-up has been a key dependency for this project all along. Sergi kind of touched on those regulations a little bit earlier, and they are moving through the process. There are stations out there that continue to have quality of service issues with that dial-up connectivity. So we're really anxious, and we are working with the Bar 97 EIS manufacturers and actually have made quite a bit of progress in terms of the certification of that equipment. We're not waiting for that regulation package to go through. We are working hard to get that equipment certified and available. Updated regulations under agency review, as Sergi mentioned. We are also working hard to make sure we provide some transparency to the industry in terms of the progress of that certification and what's going to be required and when. So there will be some updated information on our website very soon. We're publishing some FAQs. We've been getting questions from stations directly that we've been responding to as we can. We'll also have some updated information on kind of how this updated certification will impact stations and what to expect and when. But we're certainly going to encourage stations to obtain internet-ready equipment as soon as possible. That change, I'm pretty confident it's going to come. So especially stations that are impacted by quality of service issues in terms of dial-up. few other updates in terms of that activity. There is a test and a production environment that's been established. The 2 vendors, the certification is in process. Worldwide Environmental Products has actually been approved to move into beta testing. They're in the process of obtaining beta stations, so they will be doing live inspections, production inspections over the internet very soon. Opus has also submitted equipment, and we are currently working with them in the alpha test stage, so they're in the lab, and we're in the process of working with them to get their equipment certified as well. So a lot of progress in this particular area over the last 3 months. This is the same timelines that we've been presenting for some time, and we still continue to stay, for the most part, on track with our initial baseline schedule as presented in our feasibility study report. That's it. Any questions on the RFP side of things before I hand it off to Eric?
Yeah, I apologize. I didn't identify myself before. Jack Muladanoff on behalf of the California Auto Body Association. The timelines, you had the RFP responses due October 2017. I thought it was in January. Or
Those were the draft responses. The final responses are due in January. You're correct.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
'Cause it appears that when you say RFP responses due, it looks like it's October this month. That's fine. It's January, in other words.
Yes, final responses are due in January.
Okay.
I will dust off this timeline and make sure in 3 months from now it's spot on.
It says October. I'm like, okay.
That's a good catch. I've been presenting this so long, I may have glossed over this slide, and we may have been presenting slightly skewed data for the last year or so. Yes, finals are due in January, and then the schedule currently, the intent to award is May, June.
Okay.
When we announce that, yeah.
And the other question, because I know you've been bringing it up, the bar 97 dial-up conversion and dependency. I know you were a little behind on that. Now, are you back on track? Is that going to affect the timelines and baseline completion dates on the project?
I'm comfortable we're back on track. There certainly still exists a risk. Obviously, getting that equipment out to the field is largely out of BAR's control, and really depends on stations getting that equipment, and obviously dependency on those manufacturers to produce that equipment and get that equipment out in the field. But right now, the timelines look very positive. It looks like we're going to have plenty of time to get that equipment out. So yeah, I'm pretty comfortable right now.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. So with that, I'll introduce Eric Schwarz, who's, as I mentioned, the new SGS TestCom Program Manager. Excited to have some fresh meat up here. So with that, I'll hand it over to Eric.
Great. Thank you, Clay. Good morning. So as it stands for the refresh and the transition of the hardware for CalVista, right now we have completed physical installation of all of the hardware in the OTEC environment. Cabling and power connectivity have all been completed as well. Our network configurations and configuration of all the networking hardware has also been completed, and we have tested connectivity. It's on green. Okay, better? Yes? Perfect. All right. Additionally, our database prototyping has also been completed. Proof of concepts for the databases migrations have also been completed as well, and what we've done there is tested going forward, backwards, and being able to return to the old environments if need be, if something were to go wrong. And all that prototyping has been completed, and we have successfully tested it out. Additionally, application coding for Active Directory, which is going to be our new authentication program, has also been completed, and that work is now going to be moving into a testing phase. Our servers, both physical and virtual, are in the process of being configured and brought online. Alien Vault, which is a security overview scanning system, is also being configured at this time and being brought online. Security policies are under review, and they will be reviewed in collaboration with BAR to ensure that everything within the new system meets all security standards going forward. Automation test scripts for our QA testing are being completed, and I said as Active Directory testing is in progress at this time. We are also in the process of configuring the Exadata, which is the Oracle system for maintaining the databases. We're going to be migrating and upgrading all of the databases in the coming month here, as well as configuring the replication environments to maintain our data consistency between the new and old environments. Additionally, we're going to be configuring and installing the applications within the coming month and implementing Active Directory both in the current and new environment. We are in the process of starting our development for the cutover plans, and this is the cutover from the existing UAT environment into the new one, which is testing environment, and then the same thing will be used for our production environments when that time comes. We're also going to be testing and turning over the UAT environment to BAR. From a timeline perspective, I have up on here, we have 2 dates that are highlighted in red at this point. That's the delivery of the UAT environment and the acceptance of the UAT environment. Those are at risk at this point in time, but the project team is working to look at where there can be savings time-wise in the schedule to be able to ensure that this is delivered on time. But at this point, they are considered at risk. All other timelines and dates on there for the production environment, turnover, and completion are still on track and are expected to be completed on time. And that is it. Any questions?
Yeah, Jack Molodanoff again, California Auto Body Associate. You mentioned the timelines and the at-risk. I just wanted to understand what that means, at-risk. Obviously, it sounds like you're not going to make that timeline. When is the expected timeline, or what do you anticipate? The delay, how long?
Currently, the delay we're looking at is probably a couple weeks. So we're still looking at delivering within December, but we are trying to push that up so that we can hit the December 1st date.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Anyone from the audience? No? Any webcast comments? No? Thank you both.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you, Eric. Yeah.
Pleasure to meet you.
Yep.
Thanks.
All right, our next presentation, Greg Coburn with Bar Engineering Research Branch, going to give us an update on some thoughts we have for implementing regulation related to OBD inspection testing, permanent diagnostic trouble codes, otherwise known as PDTCs, right?
Right, good.
Hey, good, I got it.
Am I on, Zach? I'm on. All right,
Welcome, Greg.
thanks. All right, so some of this is going to be fairly boring, so I will go through some of it and try to hit the main topics. Thanks, Pat, for letting us come in and kind of go through a preliminary look at some things that we're looking at BAR to improve the inspection and try to catch vehicles that are in failing states. So you got to go back 7 or 8 years and look at the regulations we were passing then. I call these our OBD cut points. You know, we're all used to the Bar 97 cut points. These are kind of our OBD cut points we have in regulation. 7 or 8 years ago, when we were looking at an OBD only test, we really had to sit down with the resources board and go through what does this need to really look like in order to catch the failing vehicles. So many of these are regulations that have been around a long time at BAR, so we'll go through some of those fairly quickly. That's the prior to 2009 ones. So things, basically what the section says is that you fail if any one of the following happens. And number one is if the vehicle's mill does not illuminate, meaning the bulb is burnt out. Number two is the mill continuously flashes because it has a misfire or is on, meaning that the mill is on, it fails smog check. The vehicle's OBD system reports the mill's commanded on, meaning that within the computer it's saying that the mill's on. Whether or not it's on or not on the dash is a different story. But if it says it's on, it's supposed to fail smog. The vehicle's OBD system reports a diagnostic trouble code or DTC. So that's if there's a code set in the system, it's supposed to fail smog. Number 5, and this is kind of what we're going to be talking about today. What we had originally put in here was the vehicle's OBD system data indicates the system has not yet been sufficiently operated to determine the presence or absence of a DTC. This is where permanent DTCs come in, and we'll go over what those are here in just a minute. But just to give you guys kind of a framework for how we're working through this. Number 6, the vehicle's OBD system does not communicate with basically the equipment, with the OIS. If it doesn't comm, meaning there's something wrong with the DLC or something else, it's going to fail smog. The vehicle's OBD system data is inappropriate for the vehicle being tested. So this has a date of February 2017. This is the stuff you guys got a little bit of an update a few meetings ago on, this is where we're doing the cert blocking and sending vehicles into the referee station. So this was always kind of part of the vision of if we saw simulator use or alternative cars being plugged into, that we would mark those and use the data to send those appropriately to a station where we knew it was going to get the right test. All right, number 8, the vehicle's OBD system data does not match the original equipment manufacturer, OEM, or an Air Resources Board exempted OBD software configuration. This is kind of one of those other future things that we'll probably be talking about over the next couple of years. We've been doing a lot of research with the Air Resources Board on this. They just made a presentation at the Society of Automotive Engineers a few weeks ago on this topic and kind of some of their preliminary work looking at what we call Mode 9 data. It's Cal ID CVN, basically the indicators within the data stream that the software is correctly loaded in the computer. And to verify that it has that right version, that hasn't been modified by the consumer or by something else going on with it.
I think it's just important to point out, although the regulation, when was that adopted? The CCR 3340.42.2. When was that? Do you remember? Right after the passage of AB 2289 in 2010. I know some of these things were implemented prior to 2009, and that's because we were inspecting vehicles, a very limited OBD test on the Bar 97 when we were doing both tailpipe and OBD for those vehicles that had OBD systems. So there were some failure criteria, but very limited in scope.
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct. Good point, Pat. And readiness is the last piece of this section, which I'll go over in more detail in the next slide. But basically, that was the final piece that we saw that we needed for OBD to kind of tighten down those. As you guys have known over the last couple of years, since 2015, we've been tightening up those readiness standards. Again, making sure the vehicles are really ready for inspection. So the current readiness standards, as most of you know, 96 to 99 gasoline, we allow any one monitor not set. 2000 and newer gasoline, the evaporative system is the only monitor that's allowed not to be set. So those are the tightest within the U.S. of anybody running at this point, because many other states are not going quite as far on the OBD systems. Diesel, it's at 0 readiness monitors for 98 to 2006. And it looks to be the tightest one up there. It's not as tight as you think because many of those early diesels basically don't have any readiness monitors in them except for the first 3. So it's a very simple check. You can set those very quickly. 2007 and newer diesels are the exact opposite story. They have the hardest monitors to set once you put the after treatment on there and you put diesel particulate filters and all those fun things on there. Currently, we're at any 2 allowed, and we'll talk about that a little bit as we go through. How's the current readiness looking is kind of what this next slide is. So you can see kind of the blue lines, which look a little weird against the green background. The blue lines are gasoline, the red lines are diesel. On the bottom are your model years, and then the percent that are failing for not ready there on the other axis. So what you see is 2007, 2008 model year, you see a huge dip in there. And especially with the diesels, the little red bars showing a very low percent of readiness failures. What that is indicating is that we went to any 2 monitors for those model years because we needed to for those after treatment systems that can take a couple of thousand miles in some cases to set, and we didn't want consumers to be stuck in smog check having to drive long distances and waiting months and months to clear. That basically you can clear your codes or do anything you want, and those aren't going to be set, and you're going to pass through your smog check with potentially a vehicle that's not in a passing condition. So the reason why I point this out is it plays into why are we looking at additional standards? Why did we put in additional regulations above and beyond what we're currently doing? Well, it was to catch some of these model years. You also see on gasoline as we go through this how the evaporative system kind of plays in when we don't require that monitor to be set. So what is a permanent DTC? I'm sure everyone's asking at this point since we've used that acronym so many times. It's a permanent diagnostic trouble code. It's available through what we call within the computer mode OA, which is really just mode 10. When it's stored there, it's in the same format as what we call mode 3, which is the normal diagnostic trouble codes that you all are used to seeing. It's in the P format with some sort of numeric numbers after that. And they're the exact same codes that you would see stored there. The difference is, as it says in the next bullet point, is that these are non-erasable, meaning that when you go in and disconnect the battery or use a scan tool and say clear the codes, these ones don't clear out. They are stored there. The OBD system itself is the only way that you can really erase those codes after that same monitor has run and completed. So if a repair is made, the idea is that once that repair is made within a couple of cycles, that should delete that permanent DTC. So this was phased in between the 2010 and 2012 model years based on the ARB regulations. So the other piece, kind of the background, is there's another mode in PID within the computer. Again, these are just kind of codes stored within the computer, but this is where they're stored, is the number of warm-up cycles that are conducted since the OBD2 codes were cleared. So this is how many times did the car get up to operating temperature, and it continues to count them since those codes were cleared or a new battery was put in the vehicle. So it counts them up for us and stores that. The Mode 1 PID 31, again, just another location in the computer. Distance traveled since the codes were cleared, so it tells you how many miles the vehicle has driven since someone went in and, again, put a new battery in the car or cleared the codes with a scan tool. It counts those for us. This is supported by most 2007 and newer diesel and most 2009 and newer gasoline vehicles. So this is kind of another piece of history I need you guys to have as we talk about this as we go through the slides. Mainly because it can be used in addition to these permanent diagnostic trouble codes to determine whether the vehicle is ready to test. All right, so this confusing chart, you can't really see the highlighting. Let's see if I've got a laser pointer on here. I do, and you guys can't see it. So the highlighted there, it's basically saying what we've already gone over. So for model year 2007, what it's saying is that for diesels here in the first column, that we start to get in the 99+% vehicles for the miles since code cleared and the number of warm-ups since code cleared. So it's just kind of giving you an idea. Most of the fleet is supporting it at that point. So that's why we're shooting for those model years. Again, for diesel, around 2011, we get in that 99+ support. For gasoline, it's a little bit delayed. So for the miles and number of warm-ups, we're in the 2009 model year. And then for the permanent DTC support for gasoline, you're sitting at about a 2012 model year. All right.
The shading didn't come out so well on the hard copies, so.
Oh, well, then you guys will be really confused. If you guys have any questions, please just
It's not on
shout
mine.
it out.
No, not on that slide, but on the next one, I think we're okay. Yeah.
All right. There used to be nice big red arrows, but we tried to fix it with shading. All right, so that didn't work. So the next one, what it's really showing is this is just for diesel, and it's going over all the different monitors that are supported within diesel and what model years did those begin to play in. And then again, this is why we kind of set these standards. So for 2007, you can see that NE2, it really doesn't have the other systems supported in a large amount, but we needed NE2 to kind of cover those few that are done in there. The main thing to point out here is for the PM filter support, which is kind of the third over from the left, it really begins in 2011, which is where permanent DTCs, we're looking at bringing those in. That's really the main point to that slide. All right, so what would it look like potentially if we added permanent DTCs to smog check? So before I go over kind of where we're starting, this footnote is key. So there's a US EPA document on best practices that was put out a few years ago. They worked with the Air Resources Board and things to put this out and did some testing and had some contractors and things work on this. So their recommendation was to do this for diesels, to get the diesel particulate filters checked within a smog check program, and to use 30 warm-ups and 500 miles. And so we use that as kind of a baseline for our analysis, but we will not be coming in that high when we roll this out. So we're still looking at the data and trying to figure out what it would look like, but we put together these slides and this information that's going to come based on that standard to give an idea of what the worst case scenario would look like within the smog check program. As we back into where did that 3,500 come from, it's on an average vehicle, it's about 2 weeks worth of driving is what they're looking at. Bar is not going to start that high. All right, so again, the idea would be is that the vehicle that has a permanent DTC stored, meaning at some point it had a fault on the vehicle, it stored it in the permanent codes, and it no longer shows that permanent DTC, the mill is no longer on, that then we would look at it and say, okay, has the owner tried to drive the vehicle at all? That's the idea. Have they at least warmed the car up a few times, and have they driven it a few miles, or are they just trying to slide through the smog check? Are they trying to do they know they have an evaporative emissions problem or a diesel particulate filter problem, and they're just trying to slide just under bar standards they put in? So this is trying to kind of figure out a way to say, hey, drive a reasonable amount of distance and we'll call it good here. You don't want to get people stuck in it either. All right, so what does this look like? So if we apply that standard, what does it look like to the current fleet of vehicles? So basically these are two overlapping circles. Kind of the big circle there, which is really hard to see on this screen, is the current readiness fails. How big is that? And then we look at the permanent DTCs, which are the smaller circle, if we applied these standards. So these are different failures. They don't overlap. That was a key to us, is if permanent DTCs just gave us the same vehicles that failed for readiness, it really wouldn't have done us much good. But yes, these are additional failures. It would be getting us additional failing vehicles and identifying. So some more on the analysis. Basically, when we looked at applying that standard, it would be about a 1% increase for those early model years in the failure rate, which was pretty huge considering the failure rates on those are fairly low. Vehicles passing today that would fail the permanent DTC test. So this is again trying to give you guys an idea of what's going on. So they have a median warm-up count of 4, meaning that these vehicles that failed, they were warmed up 4 times. Remember, most of the time you take a trip to the store and back, you're getting a count of 2 already. So basically they drove somewhere and drove back from somewhere and then drove somewhere again and back. And then we had a smog check done. So it definitely indicates there's some sort of code clearing potentially going on. The distance traveled is 40 miles. So we would expect that most cars driving around, when they come in for their smog check, that they aren't getting those things reset. So obviously these consumers that have permanent DTC set have something else going on. There's some event that's causing code clearing, either it's a repair or whatever going on, and by the time they come into smog check, that car's barely had any time to check their systems at that point. Another big key here to me is that we've got 52% of the incomplete evaporative, 52% of them have incomplete evaporative system monitors that have these permanent DTCs set. So something that's not in here is that when you look at what the permanent DTCs are, the majority of them are evaporative codes. So we have codes that are stored, people are coming through smog check, they have their evaporative monitors not set, we're letting them out because you have to have certain conditions, certain amount of fuel in the vehicle, all those things to set it, and they're getting through their smog check with a big emissions, problem going on with the vehicle. Also, I wanted to step back just for a second. Why are we looking at this now? Why is this a big thing? Well, if you look at the model years we're talking about, 2011, 2012, those are just now coming into smog check, and they'll continue to be even with the 7-8 year exemption. Those will be rolling in the 2019. So we're just having them come in. Mainly this will be catching the change of ownership vehicles. So it'll be help identifying as smog check. When a vehicle comes in for change of ownership testing, it's not going to go through if it's got a large evaporative emissions failure or a diesel particulate filter that's not actually operating correctly, unbeknownst to the consumer, because the check engine light's off and it passes through smog check, they figure everything's good. So we're hoping that this type of action will help protect consumers, especially in those first number of years before they buy the vehicle. All right, so we started brainstorming what could the implementation status look like. And again, we want to get everyone's input on this and look at what this needs to look like. So we tried to throw kind of some dates on the board. We're looking at mid-2018. We could get Q&As and all those good things and hold some workshops and really communicate with the stations on what this is and what it needs to look like and get information on our website, get our call centers all up to date and all of that good stuff. So this would be looking at applying some sort of permanent DTC check, as well as figuring out what that right warm-up and mileage override criteria needs to look like. One of the big things we've been working on the last 2 years on this is looking at the data we have coming in, because we've had it coming in since 2015 with the implementation of the OIS. We just got this information. is we've been working on fixes with the Air Resources Board and with the OEMs to get vehicles fixed. We've had a number of issues like permanent DTCs. They took it too far. They really made them permanent. So once you set it, it's just never deleted even after repairs were done. So the manufacturers, many of them already have fixes and flashes out there to fix these things, but we're still cleaning up and working on that with many of the manufacturers. We went down to SAE a couple weeks ago and actually presented on this and let them know what we saw and what those problems were. The OEMs have contacted us, and we've given them numerous data and shown them where the problems are, and they have committed to get their vehicles fixed before implementation timelines. So, but we would have obviously some ways to deal with individual vehicles, which I'll go over in a second here, that have problems, as well as we're assuming that like when we rolled out Readiness, the referees will have to be available for special cases to deal with and record data and get people through their smog check events. The VIR is currently programmed to show when it's a permanent DTC failure and spelling that out so that people know what it is that they're dealing with. And again, more bar outreach to consumers into the smog industry. So this last slide is just kind of give you guys a little bit of an idea of how complex the OIS is and the amount of flexibility it actually gives to the smog check program. There are, in the big box to the right, 35 different test configurations we have that deal with all types of anomalies throughout the smog check program. So if there's something special we got to work around, whether it's readiness or some special testing or it needs a special dynamic test or anything else, we have these special test configurations. And those are, the boxes on the left just kind of give you an idea of the types of bins that we're dealing with. So it goes as I guess as fine as model year, fuel type, and cert type meaning California or federally certified, using portions of the VIN along with the certification type, and all the way down to using the individual VIN for a special spell out because there's some special A or B exemption or something on that vehicle. That was about it. Thanks for everybody for staying awake and hearing this out.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate that. I know you've recently presented to the Society of Automotive Engineers on this and have been very interested in sharing this with our stakeholders, beginning with our advisory group today. So thank you for getting it on the agenda. Any questions, comments from the advisory group? Jack.
Yeah, Jack Mulladonoff of California Auto Body Association. I just, for me at least, I'm not a tech, I'm not a smog shop, so I just kind of want to dummy it down. So you're saying that the permanent codes now, what's happening is that some of these permanent codes are within the vehicle, and they're going through, and maybe the EVAP monitor is not set, and these cars are passing, and you're trying to change that so when that permanent code is on, somehow you're going to fail. It should fail. Is that kind of what we're talking about?
Got it, Jack, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So what if the permanent code has something that's unrelated to emissions, like an airbag? So would that car now, for the consumer, would they end up failing smog on that? Is that?
That's a great question. So when we talk about DTCs, so the portions of the computer that we're looking at, it's only emissions related. So if your airbag throws a code, it's in a totally separate part of the computer. So we won't be looking at those. So they don't set a permanent DTC ever for an airbag. That's a separate manufacturer-specific piece of the computer where that's stored.
So your intent is on the permanent codes that they have to be emission related?
That's correct.
Okay. Because currently some, because I know going to smog, that they'll say, hey, if the airbag light is on, you can still pass smog, right? I mean,
right, that's correct.
Because it's not emission related.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And thank you.
Question.
Additional comments? Anyone from the industry? Anyone from the webcast? No? All right. Thank you. We'll move on. We're getting through this agenda pretty quickly. Safety recall presentations. We've got a dual presentation. Michael St. Dennis with Revicorp and Clay and Tim, our two deputy chiefs. I don't know who's going first. Is it Bar or Michael? Michael. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Pat, and thank you, committee, for inviting me to come talk about recalls. And I'm Michael St. Dennis from RevCorp, and Robert Budd is here with me as well. I have a clicker. Before I get started, there's a few disclaimers. Some of the work that I'm going to talk about was sponsored by Honda North America. The District of Columbia and the State of Vermont DMVs assisted us with some of the data, as well as Parsons and Opus, who are vehicle inspection contractors, both of which I think are here in the room. And the analysis and the data we're going to present is all of our own. It's our own work. We take all responsibility for it. A little bit about RevoCorp. We have been working on and off with BAR for 25 years, and we're a technical support contractor to US EPA. We've helped a lot of states with their programs, and one of the things through that is we started seeing the need to learn more about how do you get recalls repaired and remedied. And so through that, we have a vehicle information decoder that allows us to take the vehicles VIN, and we have a way to go find out if there's a recall for it, and we've been trying to marry that up. That VIN decoder is used in several vehicle inspection programs and by others. And one of our goals was, is there a way that we can use our VIN decoder and what we know about vehicle inspection programs to try to increase the recall remedy rates? I'm going to talk a little bit about background on recalls. What is Takata and how dangerous is it? What are the emissions recall compliance requirements, and what are the benefits if people comply? There are issues with the current recall notification process and updating of that information, and so we're trying to find ways to improve that will increase the remedy rates. And then why is that good for vehicle inspection programs? Because you can help save people's lives. We did a study, as I mentioned, sponsored by Honda, which I'll describe what we found. And then lastly, I want to make a few comments about, should recall compliance be mandatory? A little bit about recalls. Somebody mentioned all the new technology that's on cars. Cars are quite amazing if you think about what they do. The temperatures, the humidity, altitude, the jarring vibrations, and they are very, very reliable, amazingly, through the life that they have to go through. A lot of that technology is there to protect you. And we're all familiar with things that are used nowadays, seat belts, high-strength materials, and now we're getting into lane departure systems and things like that. There's a lot of technology on a car. Just the airbag system in a current technology car is more advanced than everything that was on a 1970s car. Technicians have to get smarter. Cars are more expensive and more difficult to repair. And keeping all of that maintained obviously requires a lot more. So there's a lot more chance for there to be an error, something that needs to be updated or fixed in the car, which is where recalls come into it. The recall technology, the safety technology in cars has been great. In the last 60 years, there's been a giant reduction, an 80% reduction in fatalities in cars. At the same time, there are 5 times as many cars on the road. So overall, that's a 25-fold decrease in fatalities in cars. And still, which is something I never knew, Americans under age 34, it's the #1 killer of them getting killed in a car accident. I didn't really understand that. And the cost to society is giant, $230 billion a year, as estimated by NHTSA. So first of all, what is a recall? There are 3 types of recalls. There are recalls for safety, which are handled by the National Transportation Safety Administration. There are emissions recalls, which are handled by CARB or California or US EPA in the other states. And then there are customer service recalls that the original equipment manufacturers, the vehicle manufacturers, do themselves, sometimes to prevent NHTSA from having to recall the car. They do it themselves, and sometimes they're things that they do just for convenience. The repairs are always free to the motorist unless they've tampered with the car. A lot of people don't understand that, and that's an important message to get to the consumers, and they're almost always voluntary. For safety, the OEM has to try to notify the owner at least once. Some manufacturers try multiple times, some try in multiple ways, including trying to phone the motorist, trying to find their email addresses, trying to use social media. The thing that makes the most sense to notify motorists are to use the vehicle registration systems, but unfortunately the 50 vehicle registration systems in all states are all completely different. Some of them are very antiquated, and it's not an easy task to get recall data by VIN into that system, get that notification onto somebody's registration document. We've not had a lot of luck with that. We've been working with a bunch of states. It's very, very slow. One other problem is it's very difficult to know if a recall is actually closed when it's fixed in a timely manner. So I may know that a recall is open, and I may go to the Honda dealer, I have the recall fixed, but it could take a week to 3 months for that data to get back into a system where I can see that it was closed. So if I made it mandatory to get it repaired, I don't have a way to know that it was done in a timely manner so that poor consumer can get through the program. If I say you fail because you got to get this fixed, they can't wait 3 months to get through the program. A recent survey of motorists said that 65% of them said that they would get recalls fixed right away when they got them. 30% said, I'll get around to it. 5% are suspicious and said they would never get recalls complied with their car. That's kind of amazing. So, as I mentioned, there are 3 different sources of data. NHTSA manages safety recalls, but what was odd to me is NHTSA doesn't do anything about the recalls. They're literally a pass-through. People complain that there's a problem, or they discover there's a problem through their investigation. They tell the car company they have to do the recall, and then NHTSA kind of backs out of that process. They monitor. The car companies have to turn in reports showing that they're making progress, but NHTSA doesn't actually house that data. They just monitor that data. So all they do is just make sure that the car company is trying, that the fix that they've proposed will actually fix the car. EPA actually has regulations to enforce recalls based upon emissions. Those have never been enforced. There is a regulation that says once the data is available, in order to get through a smog check program, a car has to have an emissions recall closed. That's not done anywhere right now, except for the state of California, and I'll talk about that in a second. California Air Resources Board does have a very good program that's doing that right now. And then all the OEMs themselves, basically 24 big vehicle manufacturers, store the recall data themselves, track it, distribute it, and report to it quarterly to NHTSA. California's emissions recall program is quite interesting. It does require compliance with emissions recalls in order to get registered. It started in 1989. It is all done manually, believe it or not. The California Air Resources Board pays DMV $130,000 a year to take the data in, match it to the registration data, and then make sure that it prints on registration documents. And if someone complies, match that up when they get information back. I'll explain how you do that in a second. When a recall is issued, the manufacturer has 6 months to get those cars fixed. And at that 6-month point, they have to turn in a list of VINs that haven't been repaired yet to CARB. CARB gives those to DMVs, and that's where the tracking process begins. If your vehicle has an open emissions recall, your registration is blocked until you're done. There's paper-based compliance, so you have a Honda recall, you go to the Honda dealer does it. They give you a half pink sheet of paper that says the recall was complied with. You can no longer register online. You actually have to mail that in to DMV with your check and your registration renewal. Someone at DMV has to open that envelope, process all that paperwork, mark it that it's been complied with, and then you can get registered. It's kind of amazing, but it works very well. John Urkov, who used to work at ARB, set up and managed the program, has done a fantastic job. It has a 93 to 98% compliance rate, and I'll bet those other ones are just vehicles that have disappeared, been sold out of state, get scrapped. There's no way to keep track of those last. It's very, very efficient. It works well. We also know that it's providing clean air benefits because there are cars that do have emissions recalls for reasons to reduce the emissions, and obviously those cars are getting fixed, and that only, as I mentioned, takes place in California, not in any other state. So, how many emissions recalls do you think go out in a year? It's a giant number. 28% of all motorists say that they've received a recall notice in the last 20 years. That's about 60 million last year. The notification is one thing, but compliance is the thing that actually saves lives and gets cars fixed. And that's the difficult part. Easy to send somebody a letter, difficult to get them to come in. As I noted, it's very difficult to use state registration systems to get people to comply and to get the data into them and out to the motorist. So we started thinking, is there another way to do this? We have ins to vehicle inspection programs through the VIN decoder being used in the inspection programs. We had this conversation with Honda to see if that would work, and came up with this idea to use those touch points. There are about 150 million of the 250 million vehicles out there that go through an inspection program in the U.S., so we could get to those motorists pretty easily and pretty quickly. So Honda funded us to study that. It puts the appropriate information that is correct in real time right in the hand of the motorist on a government form, letting them know that there's a problem, and I'll show you some examples here in just a second. It's very, very low cost to do this. We get the data from the 24 OEMs for free, and we pass it on to the programs for free just as a service so we can help people try to get compliance. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Takata airbag recall. There are 100 million Takata airbags that need to be replaced in about 80 million cars. It is very difficult to manufacture 100 million parts. It's a monumental task. Honda has actually paid for and built 2 factories to help manufacture replacement airbags to try to speed that process up. And so what NHTSA has done is they've divided up this airbag problem into sections of the U.S., and I'll explain why, what happens in this instance. But they're kind of starting in the Southwest, and then they're working their way up. So they're trying to get compliance in the Southwest first and then work through the rest of the U.S. In case none of you have seen it, this is an ad from Honda, which is quite informative. We'll see if it'll run. It's a video. Not. It's a video of an airbag and the difference, and you can look this up online. It's quite interesting. 1,000th of a second in an airbag, they show a watermelon drop on an airbag when it inflates, and it stops it, and the watermelon's fine. It activates 1,000th of a second late, and the airbag hits it, and as the airbag inflates, it explodes the watermelon. Those parts are very critical that they work absolutely perfectly. Okay, so there are 19 makers that have Takata airbags in their vehicles. They're 2002 to 2015. The problem is when they're activated, instead of the gas coming out slowly, relatively slowly to inflate the airbag, the canister explodes. To the left here is a picture of a canister. There's little holes on it. You can see where the gas comes out. That canister is full of little pellets. The idea is as the pellets ignite on the outside, they burn in, and the gas is kind of released slowly. The defect comes from those pellets getting exposed to humidity in the air, and the pellets degrade and turn into a powder. And when the powder is ignited, the canister just explodes instead of them burning slowly. The picture on the top right is that canister kind of upside down in the piece that goes in the steering wheel. The airbag's on the bottom of that, and that fits into your steering wheel. The bottom left is a piece of one of those canisters that came out from an airbag that exploded. And on the bottom right, you can see where that piece came through an airbag and hit a motorist. So back down to the third bullet here, there are some particularly bad airbags called alphas. They were 2002 and 2003. Unfortunately, Honda was one of the first to put airbags in cars, and those first airbags had this bad defect. If they go off, they have a 50% chance of killing the motorist. Honda has aggressively been trying to find those motorists, bring those cars in, and get them fixed. If you have one of these vehicles, they will actually drive out to your house, give you a car, put your car on a truck, take it to the dealer, fix it, and bring it back to you. They do not, if you're nervous about driving it, they don't want you driving it. They'll do anything to get these cars fixed as fast as they can. And we've developed an app for iOS and Android called VinPro. It's free. I'm not advertising a product here. But if you download this app for your smartphone, you can scan the VIN on your phone, and you can find out if your car has an open recall. So the idea was to try to get this information out to the public. Anybody can download it. There are a lot of apps out there, but they don't actually do what this is supposed to do. This actually goes out to the OEM in real time, and it'll tell you if you have an open recall. We suggest everyone check it, especially if you have one of these older Hondas, to see if you have this recall. Go get it repaired right away. There have been 11 fatalities and over 100 people injured by this. The last one was in Southern California about 6 months ago. You don't have to be scared of your airbag. There have been 1.2 million airbag deployments in the last 15 years, and they've saved about 37,000 lives. They do what they're supposed to do, but this one particular defect is exceptionally dangerous. So how do you increase remedy rates? Like I said, we performed a study to see if we hand that information directly to the motorist, if it'll increase people's responses. The District of Columbia and the state of Vermont just started printing this information on their vehicle inspection reports in January. As I mentioned, Opus Inspections in the District of Columbia and Parsons in Vermont assisted with this project to get it on the inspection reports. They've continued since we did this project, and it's still being printed today. This provided an opportunity where we had cars before January where we didn't print information, and then after to see what is the difference in the compliance rates. And so we'd used our Vindicoder to push out the recall data and print it on the inspection reports. This is the District of Columbia report. Down there at the bottom, it says open recalls. There are 5 there. It has the NHTSA number. The third one down there says airbag sensing diagnostic module. So there's an airbag recall for you. We also looked at the data to find out how many cars had recalls, how many had airbag recalls. 23% of the vehicles in DC had 1 or more open recalls, about the same rate in the state of Vermont. When we looked at the DC data, the interesting part was that some of these recalls have been open for a very long time. The average was about 2.5 years, meaning motorists got a notice and they clearly didn't think about it and probably aren't going to because they may never get another notice. The average is just over a year. We did have people that had recalls that we saw and they had been closed like immediately when we saw the car. So some people are getting their notices and going out and fixing them. And the longest one we found was 25 years old that somebody hadn't fixed. I wonder how many people's hands that car had been through before having its safety recall fixed. About half the cars that had an open recall had an open airbag recall. About 1% of all cars have an open airbag recall, and they are given a notice that says the parts aren't available yet, and that's what I mean by they're focusing parts in the worst places. As I mentioned, the Takata problem is where it's hot and humid, so they're starting in Florida, Texas, et cetera, and working their way up. People in Minnesota are probably going to get a notice right now that says that the parts aren't available yet. They are making good progress on trying to get that done. In the end, we saw the recall remedy rates almost double instantly just by printing this information on the vehicle inspection report, which is great. And we also saw that the average age that a recall was opened got cut by about 1/3. So we're actually finding some of the much older ones, getting that information back into the hand of the person who owns the car right now, and they did take it in and get it fixed. The District of Columbia program is a centralized program. They have one big 8-lane station. The difference between that and Vermont is like the state of California. There are 1,200 decentralized stations. And in that environment, the recall compliance rate went up by about a factor of 4, which is fantastic. About 30% of the people went out and got their recall fixed immediately when they got the notification. So as I mentioned, what's the difference? Vermont is decentralized. They're in a shop environment. Some of those people are actually in a dealer when they got their car inspected, and the dealer says, hey, you have this open recall, let me take it over to the other side of the shop. They could get it fixed right then and there. We think that's part of what's going on. Part of it is in the District of Columbia, there are no repair shops in the district. There are no car dealerships in the District of Columbia. So they have to go to Virginia or Maryland or wherever to go get their car fixed. So that kind of slows things down. Vermont has mandatory safety inspections, so people are thinking about safety. So if they get a safety recall, the shop's kind of in the frame of mind to remind them, hey, go and get that done. Again, those are printed on the inspection page, just like in DC, but in Vermont, it's a multi-page form, and they have a whole page just for the recalls, which I think brings more attention to it. And they also have hyperlinked messages on their inspection reports. In Vermont, they can look them up online, click on the link, and it takes them right to what the recall is, and they can make an appointment with the dealer, which is really great. Here's the Vermont inspection form. That page on the right is the recall information. What is a recall? What should I do? Who should I call? What are the dangers? All of that. They actually were given permission to use NHTSA's logo on those. So kind of in summary, I have been thinking about, should recall compliance be mandatory? What other ways are there to do it? Like I said, there are 65% of the people who say they'll get it done. Then there's this other fraction that may get it done and some that say they'll never get it done. If you think about other things that we regulate, other things that we force people to do, you have to go get other things done. You get fines. You can't re-register if you don't pay parking tickets. We require people to wear seatbelts. We require motorcycle riders to wear helmets. But we're not going to require people to fix things in their car that's dangerous and allow them to sell that vehicle to someone else when the The repair for it is free. It seems that that should be blocked, or we should do whatever we can, at least voluntarily at first, and then maybe mandatorily to try to get people to fix those cars. Just issuing them does not get it done. We actually have to get people to do the remedies for the vehicles. States really are the only ones who can do that. The dealers, like I say, the people that we worked at Honda are fantastic. They have task forces that are all over. I think Bar's gonna talk a little bit about that, to try to find these alpha vehicles and all the other open airbags. But some people just don't want to comply, and you've got to get them to fix them. So the question is, there are states out there that have mandatory safety inspection programs. Vermont's one of them. They actually don't require compliance with open safety recalls. And that started raising questions in the state. You're printing something on there saying my car has this dangerous open recall. You do a safety inspection of the car, you check the tires, the windshield, everything else, and then you allow me to drive out with a sticker. And so that's raised questions in the state. And now the state is considering passing a mandatory compliance law. The one thing that would need to be done in order to make this work efficiently is the car companies need to close that loop faster. When they do a recall repair, that data needs to get back into a system that can get out faster so that people can look at it, and we can use electronic systems to get through the entire process faster. Like I said, I think this is an easy thing to do. If BAR can print recall notices on smog check reports, I know there's an issue of space, there's an issue of paper, there's an issue of time. There are a lot of things going on there. It takes time to do, but even if we can get that information on a vehicle inspection report and hand it to the motorist, we're going to see a big bump up in compliance rates just voluntarily. That can be done for about half the population, a little over half the population in the U.S., and it's virtually free to do this. The Takata settlement, I think the last I heard was about $600 million Honda settled for alone. A lot of that was to go towards outreach, and this can be done for tens of thousands of dollars. It seems ridiculous that we don't try to go do this right away. EPA should consider forcing states to do emissions recalls. We've all heard about some of the vehicles that have been non-compliant lately and have had to be bought back or be reflashed. There's a lot of that going on right now, and it seems that California's the only one doing it, and other states should start doing it. It'd be great if California could find an electronic way to do that to make it more efficient. The other thing is that there's a way to centralize or homogenize the recall data. Right now, our systems reach out to all 24 vehicle manufacturers. We have agreements with some of them as to how to do that. It's very complex. A DMV would not be able to do that. It's just a lot of work. It looks like the car companies are going to build a centralized, easier way to do that, the systems could be connected to make that faster. And lastly, as I said, just providing the information just will increase the value of a vehicle. It'll increase the value of the vehicle inspection program. If you're looking for reasons to keep the legislature from trying to kill the smog check program, this is a good one. And you can say, look, and the Department of Consumer Affairs through the Bureau of Automotive Repair is doing this to help people save lives. You can't cancel this program. We're helping people. That's all I have. Thank you. Oh, and as I mentioned, please download that app. Tell people to download that app and go check their cars and look for the Honda recall. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I have the app on my phone, actually, and I wanted to check one of my vehicles. Thank you. Any questions for Michael? There's a second half to the presentation on some of BAR's efforts. We can hold all questions unless there's something pressing. Nikki?
I just have one comment. Our POS system in our shop has just recently started doing recalls on Toyota because that's the only company that will give the aftermarket the information at this point. So, and I'm an automotive aftermarket independent shop. So.
Yeah, they're building, like I said, I think they're going to have a centralized, easier, faster way to do it. We supply data to some scan tool manufacturers, so it shows up on, I don't know whose scan tool you have, but it does it's just started showing up on some scan tools as well, which is great.
So that information then directly downloads onto our customer's invoice at the end of the repair.
Fantastic, yeah.
All right. Feel free to stay up here if we can. Yeah, we've got 3 chairs. Tim Corcoran and Clay Leake. They're sitting on opposite sides of the room. I assure you, they're much better friends than their appearances of where they're seated today are. And now Michael's sitting in the middle of them. It's like, gosh, is a fight going to break out between you two if we? No, I'm just
There's
kidding.
nothing,
No,
nothing but love between.
Yes,
I
there's
assure you.
a very good, strong relationship between the two divisions. Anyway, thank you very much for coming forward to give an update on some of the things that BAR has been doing in this area.
So I guess before I get started, I'd just like to thank Michael. This is just a really compelling topic for me. There's people dying out there. So, a lot of these questions certainly aren't questions that BAR can answer, but I think they are questions that we as the state of California and we as industry people trying to protect consumers can start talking about and start looking at. So I think that's really, the intent of today is to start having some dialogue on ways we can help consumers and protect people, protect motorists. Back to VinPro. It is free, so I don't feel like I'm plugging your app. But I recently went on a couple ride-alongs with my gas auditors, and I frequently point smog check technicians and stations to that app. I think it's a great value service that they can provide people getting a smog check. Download the application, run a quick scan, and inform the consumer that they do have an open safety recall, and it is free to get repaired. I think that's a really easy and quick way that we as an industry can kind of help increase compliance rate and help protect consumers. So as we started kind of getting into this safety topic, and I think this is going to continue to be a really important topic for the next few years, maybe even the next decade, one of the questions was, well, why is kind of BAR involved? Is this even in BAR's swim lane? And when you look at our vision and when you look at our mission, I would argue it absolutely is. Certainly our role is to administer the California Smog Check program, but I think we also have a real core value and an interest in protecting consumers and protecting motorists. And I think DCA certainly shares those values, and I think this falls squarely in our swim lane. So in terms of a rapidly evolving automotive landscape, obviously automotive technologies evolving very quickly. The technology landscape's evolving very quickly. Michael kind of touched on the Takata airbag recall. This is really unprecedented, the size and the scope of a recall like this. You've got trends like connected vehicles, autonomous vehicles. There's been some good discussion and comments on the advanced driver assist systems, the ADAS, and how that relates to repairs of vehicles. You've got smart infrastructure. You've got kind of an information security overlay over a lot of these topics. You can't talk about connected vehicles or intelligent transportation infrastructure without talking about security. So it's a very complex landscape. It's evolving quickly. I think it creates a lot of risk, but it also creates a lot of opportunities. And I think it's really inspiring to me, and it's really important that we start looking at ways to better protect consumers as these technologies evolve and this landscape continues to evolve. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Tim, who I'm very proud to be up here with. I think we, no, seriously, I so much appreciate having a partner on the other side of the fence in the enforcement arm that shares kind of a passion for this and shares a passion for protecting consumers and kind of shares my excitement for putting together innovative solutions and thinking outside the box. So I couldn't ask for a better partner on the other side of the aisle.
Can everyone hear me? Is this okay? Yeah, if I'd known you were going to be so kind, I would have sat next to you. Sorry. Thanks. No, I share the sentiment. It's been a great partnership in the entire executive office, in fact. So, and this is a project we can all get behind. And great presentation from Michael. And one of the things he mentioned was the difficulties that NHTSA and the manufacturers are having encouraging motorists to get these recalls performed, even when they can track them down. And one of the gaps that we identified was the fact that because they're basing all this on vehicle registration information in most cases, vehicles, until they undergo a registration change, are in this black hole where you can't identify necessarily who has the car. So if it's whether it doesn't have a smog check yet, or it's just at some stage in the registration process, those folks are driving that car around potentially not knowing about the recall. So to that end, we worked with National Highway Traffic Safety Administration through one of the task forces Michael mentioned. Dolphin Group involved in Honda North America as well, and tapped into our Consumer Assistance Program database, which is a program to provide consumers assistance in getting smog repairs, but also vehicle retirement options, because we thought that perhaps some of these cars weren't registered yet because of maybe a smog issue. So maybe this was an untapped resource to identify impacted motorists. Surprisingly enough, we actually did find several thousands of hits potentially, and of those, hundreds that appeared to be brand new information, so information that NHTSA did not have for a current motorist potentially having that vehicle. So we were able to share that information with NHTSA, with Honda, with the Dolphin Group, so that they can continue their efforts to reach out to those motorists and try to compel them to take their vehicle in and get this urgent. This is the alpha vehicles, by the way, I should mention. So these are the most dangerous of the vehicles, the ones they're making a lot of special assistance options, including picking up the cars, as Michael mentioned. So they're really trying to reach these motorists. But we thought that maybe there was something more that BAR could do. And in fact, I'll invite, if it's okay, I'll invite one more person up to the podium because he could speak best to this issue. One of our supervisors from the Sacramento field office, Mr. Patrick Lutfi, if you want to come up and talk about what your staff have been able to do to contribute.
Patrick Lutfi with the Sacramento field office at BAR.
Thank you. Good morning. Okay, so when we were first asked to take on this project, we definitely jumped on an opportunity to reach out to the public and assist them in educating them on this recall, specifically given the safety nature of it. The list that says there are 500 plus is roughly about 532 consumers that we reached out to. It was over a course of three or four different attempts at reaching out to all the different individuals. And through the different attempts, we eventually ended up with a 50-50 split of consumers that messages were left with them and no response, and then roughly 50% of them either responded or answered to our phone calls. The 50% that messages were left with, roughly 43 of those, and keep in mind this is as of Friday of last week, 43 of those consumers have completed the recall. There is typically a slight delay in updating either NHTSA's website or these different apps as to these completed recalls, but 43 so far have completed. And that's actually a 50-50 split as well of the ones that actually answered phone calls. Of the ones that answered phone calls or returned any of their phone calls, 76 of those consumers claimed to have no longer had the vehicle. Of those 76, 11 of them actually completed the recall after our reach out efforts. So even though they stated they no longer had it, 11 of them actually had it completed. 8 consumers claimed to have already taken care of the recall. Records did not reflect that. Of those, 1 have since completed the recall. And also 30 consumers that said they would take care of it have actually taken care of this recall, and it shows that it's been completed. One of the things that we came across, though, there was a great deal of apprehension in dealing with these consumers when we were reaching out to them, whether it was the fact that it's a government agency reaching out to them or whatever the case may be. But we did our part to reassure them that there was no malice or ill intent of our reach out. It was rather to provide clarity and a better understanding of what the recall entailed, and specifically the safety nature of it, that it could provide harm to them, any passengers in their vehicles. And I know we talked a little bit with management so far, but maybe trying to capitalize on some type of joint efforts in community-based organizations to help spread this out and continue providing clarity. But so it was a total of 86 of these were, as of Friday, have showed completed, which is roughly about 16% of the 500 plus that we contacted.
Thank you. Excellent work.
So in terms of what's next, I'm really committed to continue, to engage any stakeholder and have a conversation with any stakeholder that has an idea on how we can move this forward and how we can better protect motorists. Specifically, what are our next steps? Michael mentioned a a service that some of the OEMs are working on to make some of this recall data more available to smog check programs like California. So we're carefully monitoring the status of that opportunity. I'm really excited about working to add, open safety recall data to the VIR. I think that's something that we can do, and I think it's something that we should do. So we are continuing to explore that, and I hope to have, continue to report on the progress of that as we move forward. We've also been looking and been investigating obtaining some additional authority to define a more comprehensive safety vehicle inspection. Earlier we kind of talked about brake and lamp. I agree. I think there's opportunities to strengthen our authority in that area and potentially improve that program. And I don't know if you want to talk more about some specific steps, but we've taken some very actionable steps to move that direction that I think you'll hear more about soon. And lastly, just scanning, this complex landscape, this automotive and technology landscape, continuing to reach out to industry and find ways to educate and inform consumers. When I see statistics like 5% of people aren't going to get it fixed, that tells me they're not informed and they're not educated. Because some of those recall, you got a 50-50 shot of dying if you get in a car with an alpha airbag, right, and it deploys. So that's an education issue, and I think that's something we as a group can work to overcome. But lastly, I'd like to thank everybody up here for their part in this presentation, and really looking forward to continuing the dialogue around safety with all of our stakeholders. So thank you, guys.
Thank you all. Any questions or comments from the advisory group members? Jack?
Yeah, Jack Molodanoff, California Auto Body Association. Thank you very much for the presentation. And maybe this question is directed to Michael. So I understand current law. So there's a difference between an emission recall versus a safety recall with regard to registering your vehicle now? Is that correct?
True. So in California, ARB enforces the emissions recalls, and as far as I know, there's no requirement to comply with safety recalls either for registration.
So if I have a used vehicle, this is hypothetical about a used vehicle, and there is an emission recall, I will be notified. Well, I won't be able to register my vehicle because there's an open recall, emission recall, right? So that's how I get notified. If I have a used vehicle and I have a safety issue, whether it's an airbag or a battery or brake or something that's non-emission, how do I get notification? I mean, how would is that really the issue here? We're talking about the notification to the consumer on a used vehicle on safety. How would they end up finding out that I have an open recall, a safety recall?
Yeah, there's the car companies did about a year and a half ago did a very interesting study where those 65% numbers and the 5% come from. The OEM is only required to reach out to the motorist once. So it could be that I get DMV data and then it takes them a while to process that, do the letters, get the letter approved by NHTSA, get the letter out to the motorist. You could have sold the vehicle by then. They only have to send one letter, so you could have sold it to Pat and he may never know. You may get the letter and it says NHTSA warning for your safety, Honda, everything on it, and you go, oh, it's from Honda, it's an oil change coupon, and you throw it away. If you miss that one notification, you may never find out again.
I agree with what Clay was saying. I think most people will, end up fixing the recall if they know about it. I don't think a lot of folks know they have an open recall, a safety recall, I should say, because how do they get notified? Because if they've, there's 2 or 3 sales down the line, or 3 or 4 buyers, you're not going to end up getting notification. And I know for a fact that some people say, hey, I found out because they checked on a website or something, they had an open recall, but that's like after 3 or 4 years, they didn't know. So anyway, good information, very informative, and I think it's really important work. Thank you.
So just one more, another way consumers can find out if they have a recall, obviously the VIN Pro app is one way. You can go to NHTSA's website directly, punch in your VIN, and it will spit out a list of open recalls as well. We actually recently added a link to that and some information on our website as well to help push consumers to kind of, go do that research and find out if they have open recalls.
You can get it directly from the OEMs. If you go to one of the things that the study found is people will go to the dealer to have their car serviced, while it's new, while it's under warranty, and then after that they don't go back. But if you do go to the dealer and get it serviced generally, the dealers always check for recalls because they want that service work. It's paid for by corporate. So I'm the local whatever dealer. I want to do that work. So if I find it, I get it done, I get paid by corporate. I make my customer happy, and it didn't cost me anything or them anything. So it's, for the newer cars, that works great. For the higher end cars, we find that works great. Like when you look at recall rates for Mercedes, they're very, very low because those people generally take them back to the dealer and the dealer does it. It's just.
Thank you for those additional comments. John?
John Gallo, California Automotive Business Coalition. This kind of ties in with a lot of what you're talking about. And I think it's critical that they end up with some type of centralized clearinghouse for all these VINs and all the recalls and all the things that are impacting these vehicles, especially when you have the consumers that are not well informed about the safety issues and the risks they're facing. I think a tie-in to that, and something we talked about yesterday in our meeting, is the concern that we have over all of these vehicles that are being impacted by the floods. And based on a recent study, and NBC just published yesterday, there's 763,000 vehicles, they estimate, that were impacted by the floods. 60% of those motorists are not insured. And the concerns that we see kind of looming is similar to what we saw with Katrina and all the flood damaged vehicles that had their titles washed, to where once they were a salvaged vehicle, then all of a sudden they showed up with a clear title. And we're concerned in kind of looking at the landscape of the safety issues of these vehicles, not to mention the electrical emission, all the other systems in that vehicle. And if the consumers only have to patch these things up, turn them around and sell them, and unbeknownst to the buyer. And we're looking at it from the standpoint that there has to be a way to identify the VINs of these vehicles in the flood zones and have them flagged through NHTSA or whatever other clearinghouse to be able to really get an understanding of these, because we saw many of these flood vehicles after Katrina come into the California marketplace. That was not a good situation.
I can partially answer that. There is a separate system. This is separate from recall, the NVIDIS, the National Vehicle Title Information System, which is actually rather new. It's a year and a half old, where all of the states share vehicle title information. Some of the states aren't completely online with that. California is only half online with that. And the idea is to prevent vehicle theft and washing titles, where you take a car from one state to another, re-register it, and then take it back to sell it, and you don't know that it was salvaged in that state. So now the states are starting to share that information. It makes it much more difficult just recently to do that sort of thing, as well as it helps a lot with vehicle theft. There are 10 companies that provide that information. It costs $5. If anybody's going to buy a used car, I would run the VIN through that system. It will tell you where it's been registered and its entire registration history, and you can see that. And I believe California had a law, I could be wrong, this is where I'm not real focused on it. I believe California had a law that said if you buy a used car, the dealer is supposed to print that out and provide it to you so you can see it.
Thank you. Any others? Yes, George.
George Ritz, California Automotive Teachers. My question, Michael, is you said that it's a big problem to produce all these replacement airbags. How long have people been sitting waiting for it? I've got a car that a year and a half I'm waiting for an airbag replacement.
I don't really know. My understanding is about 20% of the airbags that they need have been produced, but it's ramping up. Like I said, they're starting to produce more and more and more and more. So, and then the ones that are being produced are being directed into places that have high humidity and high temperatures. And so, although the part for your car may be available, California may not have high humidity. So, if you look on NHTSA's website, they actually have an airbag replacement zone map. They've divided the country up, and the parts are being distributed that way.
The dealer explained all that to me, but
right.
Every time I get in the car, I think about it.
Yeah.
Other comments? Any webcast comments? Anyone from the audience? All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you, Michael. Our next presentation is on used vehicle inspections. Tim gets to stay in the chair, and he is joined by Jaime Ramos with the Field Operations and Enforcement Division, one of our program managers up here in Sacramento. Welcome, Jaime, and Tim again.
Thank you, advisory group members. Thank you, Chief, for a little more of your time this morning. And I'd also like to, because it would not be possible without their participation, not to put them on the spot, but I'd like to invite our colleagues from the Department of Motor Vehicles to join us.
Absolutely.
Mrs. Aileen Short and Joy Cunanan, if you want to join us at the podium.
Welcome to you both. Thank you for joining us.
So a little bit of background. We, in about, I believe, June of this year, we received a media inquiry, and as media inquiries will do, it will put an emphasis, a focus on certain issues that we need to look at. And this particular media inquiry focused on a consumer complaint BAR had received regarding a used vehicle sale transaction wherein the consumer had purchased a vehicle from a used car dealer. The check engine light was on at the time of the sale. However, assurances were reportedly made by the selling dealer that that problem would be handled after the fact. They would fix the check engine light. Everything would be fine. And we went ahead and inquired. So Executive Office asked Jaime, who runs Southern California Field Operations, to have his office take a close look. They did so and did indeed find evidence to support those claims. And through BAR's intervention, we were happy to say we were able to get the vehicle repurchased by the dealer because several attempts had been made to essentially cover up the problem with the vehicle. It did not have correct or functioning catalytic converters on the vehicle. So thousands of dollars in repairs were necessary at the time that customer bought that vehicle. And despite several months having gone by, it still remained in a condition where it would not have passed a smog test. So we helped that consumer, and we were able to return $12,000 to that consumer. But it did cause us to question, is this a bigger problem? How often does this happen? And who's there to help? Is it BAR's jurisdiction? Is it DMV's? So we looked closer at the issue. We found that it's a shared responsibility between ourselves, our partners at Department of Motor Vehicles, who license the dealers, and ARB has a role as well. And to the end of trying to find out how widespread this issue is, we began by literally conducting a manual review of complaints. As our advisory group members are all too familiar, our IT system does not give us the ability to really drill down when we're looking at complaints. There are very broad trend categories. So it doesn't do us a whole lot of good in finding out what are the specific complaints being raised in all instances. So we had to start with a very big group of trend codes that might give us some insight here. And we found 4,000 complaints over the last 2 years where there was some involvement with a used car dealer. But that only got us those particular complaints, not necessarily how many were related to the check engine light being on or other smog indications of smog compliance at the time of a sale. So we had to literally review 4,000 complaints. So our management team read through those complaints and identified, and again, this is just over the past 2 years, over 800 instances where the consumer had that exact same allegation, where they purchased the vehicle. Within hours, maybe days sometimes, but often hours, the check engine light comes on, or maybe the light was on even at the time of the sale, and the dealer would not resolve the issue. The claim would be made that this vehicle was sold as is, it had passed a smog inspection before the sale, so it must have been fine at the time, and something broke after you bought it, even just within hours of leaving the car lot. For edification, there's a slide with the check engine light. Aren't familiar. And then this slide is a photograph of a missing catalytic converter, but rather than just a void between the header or the Y pipe and the rest of the exhaust system, in this case, a straight pipe had been bolted in between. And you can see in this particular instance, there's actually bungs on there for the O2 sensors so that those smog devices can still remain in place even though the catalytic converter is completely missing from this particular vehicle. So that's one example of what you might see. I mentioned earlier the authority. So again, it's a shared jurisdiction item. BAR currently licenses and regulates 35,000 automotive repair dealers and 7,000 smog check stations, while DMV licenses and regulates over 7,500 used car dealers. Vehicle Code Section 24007 states that no dealer shall sell or offer for sale a vehicle that is not smog compliant. And then California Health and Safety Code Section 43012 provides DMV, BAR, and ARB authority to inspect the emission systems on vehicles offered for sale at a car dealer. So this is the specific section at play here. These inspections are nothing new. BAR has done these in the past, and typically it's on a as-needed basis where DMV might reach out to us, where we might have a consumer complaint that tells us a particular dealer might be engaged in a practice like this. But again, with this focus and having reviewed thousands of complaints and seeing something of a trend, it's at this point that we decided to increase our efforts in this particular area to assure consumers are protected. Turned over to Jaime to talk about those inspections.
So, in response to these consumer complaints, and obviously for consumer protection, we reached out to DMV, partnered with them. I'd like to say thank you right out the bat, because when we reached out to DMV, there was no hesitation whatsoever, and they agreed to jump on board. They did see it as good consumer protection, and really jumped on board. So through their occupational licensing inspectors, we went out and started doing some inspections. Like Tim mentioned, it all started back on the one consumer complaint that we had. After we got that vehicle bought back and the consumer was made whole, I had my field office go out with DMV, and we inspected the remaining vehicles on that lot, and we did find some additional vehicles that were not in compliance. And that's what kind of triggered us to start looking at these consumer complaints and going through mining of data to see whether it was more of a widespread thing on it. So we did start doing these inspections on it. And the main purpose of this inspection is to identify the vehicles that are for sale and that are not smog compliant, and that they do need repairs, or may need repairs to bring them into compliance. During the inspection, we check the vehicle's emission system. That's a visually inspection, as well as we check the vehicle's computer system to see if there's any problems, like the mill light being commanded on and it not being on, as well as checking the mill light. On this next screen here, we have some of the causes that would result in our inspection failure. Such items as illuminated check engine light, incomplete readiness monitors, missing or incorrect catalytic converters, missing or tampering emission components, non-approved aftermarket parts, cold air intakes, exhaust manifold, headers on it, and as well as no valid smog certificate of compliance at the time we inspect it. I have to be honest, when we went into this, I did not anticipate or expect the results that we actually did find on it. And we have some numbers that I will move on into in a couple slides from here as to what we found on some of those inspections on it. So if a vehicle fails the inspection, it is going to be flagged, and it's going to be directed to the referee for a smog inspection. The referee is the one that's going to clear the flag off of it after it passes. Oh. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so it'll be directed to the referee for the smog inspection. Once a vehicle is flagged, we're going to put a notice that we call a not for sale notice, and it is attached to the windshield, lower right-hand corner of the windshield, and it notifies prospective buyers that the vehicle is not in small compliance. That notice is going to be, after doing some thorough research, we reached out to California Highway Patrol, and we don't want the dealers to remove this. We want it to be driven to the referee with this actual not for sale sign, so it doesn't get removed on it. And CHP came back and says that legally we can have up to a 7x7, paper or decal or something in the lower right-hand corner, and it would be completely legal with California Vehicle Code. So they did refer us back to a vehicle code, so we made an adjustment there, made the sign to be 7-inch by 7-inch, so that there is no legalities with them driving it with that notice affixed to the windshield. The vehicle then must pass a smog inspection at a referee facility. Okay? The car dealer shall not sell the vehicle until a valid certificate of compliance has been issued by the referee. And there's a few exceptions. If they wholesale it, they need a notified bar that they're going to be wholesaling it out. So there's a few exceptions on that, though. We do advise the used car dealer when we're out to perform the inspections, if they are going to wholesale it, they have to notify us on it. If the vehicle fails inspection solely for incomplete readiness monitors, the dealer has the option of having BAR come out and re-inspect the vehicle within 10 business days. If the readiness monitors have been completed, their required self-test, and the check engine light is not illuminated, then the vehicle flag was removed. And this is something that took a lot of thought, and we discussed it on it, because obviously if you remove a battery and replace it, there's a good chance that the readiness monitors can be cleared and it's not going to be in a passing condition. But we also went through back looking at the complaints, and a lot of them had to do with, I bought the vehicle and hours or days within buying the vehicle, the check engine light came on. We did one inspection where we were actually doing the inspection at the used car facility, and a consumer came back, and the lot person went and was clearing the code right in front of us, and we asked him, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm clearing the code." And the customer says, "This is my 4th time coming back. They keep telling me it's a gas cap, but all they do is clear the code." So this consumer was very, very upset, and the fact that the used car dealer was doing it right in front of us was very appalling, to say the least. So it does add credit to what we're doing it. So
I'll just add, to put a fine point on that last bullet, we basically recognize that dealers will typically prepare a car for sale. They'll do an underhood detailing, and even if they don't replace a bad battery, they may remove the battery terminals and clean them, put the terminals back on, apply some inhibiting spray. So this was what we thought was a reasonable allowance to allow for what's a perfectly acceptable practice, preparing a car for sale, but to also assure that that's not used as a loophole. We don't want to have the instance where every one of these where the readiness monitors are incomplete, every one of those is just disregarded, and a good percentage of those may be because, in fact, it wasn't just for setting up the vehicle for sale, but it was, in fact, to clear a check engine light and sell the vehicle. So that was something that we worked closely in our early days of ramping up these inspections to find that correct balance, make sure we're accomplishing the mission at hand, but also be able to give the industry a reasonable way to do what they need to prepare a car for sale.
So one more thing to add also in regards to the incomplete monitors. We give the used car dealers a couple of options. Maybe we're going to be there for a few hours, so if we identify one of the first vehicles that has readiness monitors that have not been set, we give them the option that they could drive it around while we're still there, and we will check it prior to leaving and see if the monitors have been ran to completion. Excuse me. And that's one option there. And then the other option is that at some point after we leave, they have up to 10 business days to give us a call, and we'll send a representative back out there to check that vehicle again. The side note of that is that we will only go back out there for the vehicles that have failed solely for incomplete monitors. So if it's a combination of, let's say, an incomplete monitor and a missing cat and now they put a CAD on there, we're not going to re-inspect that vehicle. We just, the resources are not there to keep going back and back and back on it. So we will solely go out there if it failed just for incomplete monitors. Any other failure reason will still be directed to the referee. And we discussed earlier the sign that goes in the windshield. This is the actual sign that we put in there. Okay, and on the next page, as promised, we have some stats from doing our inspections. So as of October 13th, we've done 20 used car dealers inspections on it. We've inspected a total of 454 vehicles. Out of these 454 vehicles, 143 of them were flagged for referee inspection. We also had the 10-day option of monitor only coming back and clearing them. We had 31 vehicles that we ultimately went back out and ended up removing the referee flag because the monitors had been ran and set and everything was smog compliant on it. Out of those 20 that we inspected, only 3 of the used car dealers that we went to did not have any vehicles that had deficiencies with them.
One thing I'll add is we've done 20 of these so far this fiscal year, and we have let our this recent review of consumer complaints, the 4,000 and then 800 as a subset, kind of guide us a bit, as well as receiving input from our field staff as to which dealers we thought may be engaged in this type of practice. So I feel it's only fair to give that caveat. I don't want these numbers to necessarily paint the entire industry with a broad brush. This is a very early and somewhat targeted for the inspections.
On this next slide, we have a little bit more detailed numbers as far as what we found on the vehicles that were flagged for the referee. As you can see, the first one is 52 of the vehicles that we went and inspected did not have a certificate of compliance on it, which, again, before it's even offered for sale, they must have a certificate of compliance, a smog certificate of compliance on it.
So remember, it's 2 things. That the vehicle has to be in a present state where they would pass and have that certificate. It's not just one or the other. So that's where the no certificate comes in. That case, they in fact had not even had a smog. So it would be similar to the, I presume, the check engine light on the initial complaint from June with that check engine light on. That, in all likelihood, was a vehicle that hadn't yet been smogged, and there was some promise made to fix it and then smog it.
The next one is incomplete monitors. We had 55 vehicles that we found for incomplete monitors. And if we attach the number that we previously discussed, where 31 of the incomplete monitors were ultimately the flag was removed, we still have 24 vehicles out there that we can only anticipate that they probably had issues that were not worth fixing, or they haven't been fixed yet because they haven't made it through the referee, and we have not gone back out there to remove the flag. The next one is the most egregious to me, I believe. We have 29 vehicles that when we went to go inspect them, and these are offered for sale by the used car dealer, 29 of them had the illuminated check engine light on, and they were still being offered for sale. And we keep going back to the complaint that we handled out of, my area over there. That consumer bought that vehicle with a check engine light with a promise that come back the next day and they were going to correct it, without the used car dealer even knowing what the problem was. We think of, and maybe he did know and he was just hiding it. We don't know, but that for 29 of these vehicles, it should never be on that lot with that check engine light on there. Next, we found 25 vehicles that had tampered emission control systems on it. We found 7 that had missing or incorrect catalytic converters. I mean, I think 2 or 3 of those were actually missing and, had like straight pipes like what we seen on the picture on there. Again, it's just blatant, not smog compliant on it. And I put it back to if I had a family member or, a close friend or somebody that was out, wasn't vehicle savvy and they purchased this vehicle, they could easily be, taking advantage of that. On the next one, we put together some, this is not a full list of it, but maybe a few lists of consumer tips that they could use when purchasing a used vehicle. One of them is to have the vehicle inspected, possibly by a third party prior to the purchase. Dealers are required to post a sign advising consumers of the following: that the prospective purchaser of a vehicle may, at his or her own expense and with approval of the dealer, have the vehicle inspected by an independent third party, either on or off the premises. And this is actually in vehicle code. Another option is they can check BAR's website for smog check history, and that could be done at www.bar.ca.gov. As I think we may have already mentioned, you can check for any open recalls at www.safercar.gov. And then also we have the DMV's website, www.dmv.ca.gov. And this is to verify the dealer license, obtain additional car shopping tips, and for information on the consumer rights and recourse if they have any problems that arise during or after the purchase of the vehicle.
And I'll point out that consumers can file a complaint also with the Department of Motor Vehicles, whose investigation division looks into concerns regarding the sale of a motor vehicle. And obviously, Bureau of Automotive Repair will also assist consumers with that very same issue.
This next one is, the previous slide, we had talked about consumers being able to go to BAR's website and to look up a vehicle smog history on it. So this is an actual slide that this is what they would see if they ran a VIN number or a license number on a vehicle. And in the middle of the page, to see if everybody can see it, I know it's kind of hard up on the screen, but we added some language on it, and this is what the consumers would see on there. As well as in the middle of the page, there's a highlighted area where it says referee certification required. So not only do we tell consumers, but we're also telling used car dealers if they're going to be buying a vehicle from, say, a wholesale, they can also go on there and check the vehicle before they purchase it to see if it is a referee-directed smog inspection that is due on that vehicle. And the last one, we threw together a few tips for the used car dealers so that they could, if we do happen to go out and visit their facility, that they can limit or ensure that their vehicles are not going to be flagged for the referee inspection. So if they're purchasing at the auction, we, like previous mentioned, check BAR's website for any smog check history, and that'll tell them if it's got a referee flag on it that's going to direct it for referee inspection. They can also check for any open safety recalls. So similar to what we tell the consumers, it applies to the car dealer as well. As far as preparing for a used car vehicle inspection, they could perform reconditioning, any safety inspection before the actual smog certification and smog inspection on it, so that if you do have any type of say you're changing the battery or something of that nature, that all the monitors and everything have been completed and passed before an actual smog gets done on it, and rather than doing it after the fact, and run the risk of having the monitors not set if we happen to come into the facility. Another one is be conscientious of computer keep alive memory when disconnecting the batteries, and implement any measures to prevent the resetting of the OBD monitors on that. So again, if they're going to be changing the battery out, there's devices out there that could save that keep alive memory so that the monitor do not reset itself on it. And then the last one is, it's pretty blatant, and I don't know why we say it, but we have to say it, and that is all vehicles offered for sale must have a valid smog certificate of compliance when it's on their lot for sale.
Thank you both. Anything to add on from DMV's perspective relative to the inspections that have been occurring? Thank you for the partnership.
You're welcome. We have appreciated the opportunity to partner up with BAR. We take consumer protection very seriously, so we think this has sent a clear message to the industry.
Thank you both for being here. Questions from the advisory group members? John?
Just a quick comment. I think it really kind of ties in because we're looking at redoing the brake and lamp licenses and the booklet, and I'm almost wondering, and maybe just for the sake of thought, is to come up with a certified used vehicle inspection program where a consumer could take it to a certified lamp, brake, and inspection center and have the vehicle inspected to make sure it has all the things it's supposed to have. I mean, let's face it, we keep talking about the issues of these salvage vehicles coming back into the marketplace, missing airbags and other safety equipment, all these other issues that continue to surface, and maybe just food for thought is having some type of certified program that is monitored by the Bureau in conjunction with the DMV, where these vehicles can be taken by a consumer that's looking to purchase them. Because again, we talked earlier about the permanent diagnostic trouble codes that are stored, and these vehicles that are driven away and within hours or a few days the engine light comes on, to have a certified center look at that and see that that code was already stored and all they did was clear it long enough for the consumer to get off the lot. Just some things to think about.
Thanks for the comment, John. I think there's some appealing aspects to the comment from BAR's perspective. Probably shouldn't go beyond that, other than say I think there'll probably be a need for some existing statutes. We can look at how to enhance some of these our protections, consumer protections with respect to the current lamp and brake programs, and that's what we're doing with some of the regulations that we talked about earlier when Sergi gave his update. But beyond that, a more comprehensive and certification program probably would require legislative changes. Other comments, questions? Webcast, anything from the audience? Dean? I didn't know if you were leaving, waving goodbye, or you were coming up. That was a signal. I read it right, I guess. You were coming up. Good, come on up. Gene Lopez?
Hi, Gene Lopez with Seidner's Collision Center. When I saw the agenda a couple of weeks ago, I got excited because I saw permanent DTCs on the agenda. And it's because of the ADAS, the advanced driver assistance systems, and because several OE vehicle manufacturers came out with position statements on scanning every vehicle if it's been in an accident, and this is Fiat Chrysler, General Motors, BMW, Mercedes-Benz, Toyota, Nissan, and the Lexus and Acura, Honda vehicle manufacturers have all taken this position statement that vehicles need to be scanned if they've been in an accident. And what we're learning, Seidner's has been doing this since October of last year. There's a lot of permanent DTCs that we can be reluctant to tell the consumer about because it could open a can of worms for us as repairers. And so, you know, with the support of Consumer Affairs and the BAR and perhaps the DMV, we need to learn to know what the right thing is to do. And in my humble opinion, the right thing to do is to tell the consumer, hey, you've got a permanent history code or default code, and we can tell you what it is, and you probably know what it is, but we can't repair it. And unfortunately, a lot of times, what happens is, well, it wasn't there before I bought my car to you. And now we potentially are owning that default code. So I bring it up because I saw the permanent DTCs on the agenda, and I thought that we would have a discussion around that. And if not today, perhaps at a future meeting, we bring some subject matter experts in on how to best serve the California consumer when they have a history code or a permanent code that we will clear. And the reason we're going to clear that code is because after our repair, so this is what the recommendations from these vehicle manufacturers are saying, is that if the car's been in an accident, you need to pre-scan the vehicle for any DTCs. So we pre-scan the vehicle, and we can come up with some history codes or permanent codes, and maybe some codes that were related to the collision. We disconnect the battery on these repairs, and as soon as you disconnect the battery, you can promote other DTCs. And we repair the vehicle and we perform a post-scan. On that post-scan, typically, any of those DTCs that showed up because of the damage to the vehicle will have now been cleared because we made the repair to that particular part of the damaged vehicle. If they show up again, we clear them, we will test drive them, and if they show up on a second post scan, then we know we need to take it to the dealer because there's some sort of calibration or reinitialization or relearning that we can't provide. We don't have the calibration tools. And when we clear those, we've talked about clearing clearing codes already today. When we clear those codes, 100 miles or 500 miles later, they're going to show up again, and they may show up this time with an indicator on the dashboard, and that's when that can of worms gets opened up. So it needs to be a discussion, especially on these late model vehicles with the crash avoidance systems and the lane departure systems and the cameras and the radars that are becoming standard on most vehicles today. Thanks.
Thanks, Gene. There was you may have been out of the room, there was a presentation on the permanent DTCs as it relates to the smog program, but we didn't get into it as it relates to collision repairs. So maybe that is a future agenda item.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. Other comments? Okay. Thank you all. Thank you, DMV. All right. Next up on the agenda is the fiscal year 2017-18 enforcement statistics. It's actually not a presentation. We have reduced it to a handout only unless there are specific questions that Bill is here, right? Bill, I see you. I don't know if anyone's had a chance to look at it, but certainly feel free to ask any questions of Bill, or if anything comes to mind right now, we can invite him up. But I think these are pretty standardized reports over the last couple of years, and so no new information other than just updating it to reflect the first quarter statistics for this year and comparing it to the first quarter of last year. All right, I'll move along. Public comment on items not on the agenda. Advisory group members? Oh, did you have a question on or a comment on the enforcement statistics? No, okay. Public comment on items not on the agenda, okay.
Just one of the questions that's come up from our members has to do with the equipment certification on both Opus and Worldwide, because one is pitting one against the other, that their programs and equipment is approved, and the other is saying the other is not approved. And so we just need to get clarification from the Bureau that both Opus and Worldwide's equipment has been approved and certified.
Okay.
For the smog check program.
Okay. as it relates to Bar 97, we have
Yeah.
4 certified manufacturers currently. As it relates to the new specification that is going through the regulatory process, only 2 vendors have proclaimed to us upon our asking that they intend to move forward, and those being Worldwide Environmental Products and Opus, and neither of which is certified under that new specification.
So neither of them are certified at this
They're
point.
certified under the old or current
The old Bar
specification.
97 spec.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the new specification is being, is going through the regulatory process right now.
Thank you.
Information on this is going to be kept current on our website. I think Clay Leak, during his presentation, addressed that issue. We realize that there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of, I'm sure, jockeying for in the competitive marketplace for the business as it relates to the updated specification. We'll make sure that that information is as up to date as possible on our website. We're going to have some Q&As and some other fact sheets and kind of readiness, certification readiness or status for the 2 manufacturers that have announced that they're moving forward with the Bar 97 update. I think we've divided that certification into kind of 3 phases, as I recall. There's the removal of the phone, the dedicated phone line, and going internet, and then there's a couple other aspects to it with the low-pressure fuel evaporative testing being integrated into the Bar 97 analyzer, and one other feature as part of the 3 phases.
Yeah, the Bar 2017 specification is the new specification included in the regulations package that was touched on today. So we anticipate equipment kind of being updated in 3 phases. The first phase being the dial-up to IP, and that's actually the piece that both Worldwide and Opus have submitted for us to start testing with, and that I mentioned Worldwide's actually been approved to go to beta testing, which is a limited number of production smog check stations, and Opus is still in the alpha phase as well with that internet-ready equipment. Phase 2, as Pat mentioned, will be the integration of the LETFET, and Phase 3 has some other enhancements. But what we anticipate, and I do recognize it's complex because there's other certification processes like new benches and some other things going on all in parallel. Yes, the website will be updated, and we'll try to make that as clear as we can so stations and industry have a resource to go look at and get the current status. Yeah.
Probably an updated ET blast, kind of pointing them to the website as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Other questions or comments for items that were not on the agenda? Jack? No? Okay. Webcast viewers, listeners? Anyone from the audience? Okay. All right. We are getting close to adjournment. Our next Bar Advisory Group meeting is scheduled for January 18, 2018. Do we have a room identified yet? We're supposed to be here, I'm told. DCA's HQ1 building, headquarters number 1 building. I do want to say it's been a pleasure working with everyone this year. Continue to enjoy these meetings and the excellent presentations and all of the feedback we get from our stakeholders. We are feeling the need to kind of, we've had an appointment process that has been not so defined for these, the advisory group. I know some of the members have been on for quite some time. We've had some people come and go. I believe some people have not been attending and may no longer be on the advisory group, not to our, and we have no knowledge of that, and maybe that hasn't been communicated. So I think at the following this meeting, as we wrap up the year, we'll look to kind of start everybody with a clean slate and ask for renewals or reassignments or reappointments of the advisory group, just to kind of get everybody kind of reestablished in the new year. So don't be surprised when you see communication from my staff or myself asking, do you intend to stay on, and we'll set a new appointment date, as well as maybe clean up some of the advisory group members who maybe are no longer on the group and are still being listed as members. I think that's a good thing for us to do as we move forward. I'll probably set them for 2-year appointments, just kind of thinking out loud here. We haven't really kind of defined that yet, but just, and then do this every 2 years. Okay. Any other comments? All right. We're officially adjourned. I think we got out of here about 45 minutes early. Good. Enjoy the rest of your year here in 2017. Thanks all. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, and I joked about the comments we get, and they're so valuable to us.